Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Monday, May 19th. It is 6 p.m. and it's time for this Lakewood City Council member meeting. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bell has been excused. Councilmember Boki,
Here.
Councilmember Brandstetter,
Here.
Lord Sella,
Here.
Councilmember Pearson,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Moss,
Here,
and Mayor Whalen has been excused. You have a quorum.
thank you. If you would join me for a pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a proclamation tonight, and I'm going to ask if Ms. Patsy O'Connor join Larcella, Councilmember Larcella at the podium, please. Okay. Mrs. O'Connor, would you come to the meeting?
We're gonna talk
Thank
for you.
you.
Nice to meet you too. All right, can you guys hear me okay out there now? No? We have audio speakers to turn up?
It sounds.
All right.
wonderful.
All right, well, I'll try and speak loudly enough for you. All right, thank you. I'm honored to be able to read this proclamation tonight on behalf of City Council, our Deputy Mayor, and our Mayor. So I'll go ahead and get started. All right. Whereas in May, we take time to reflect on and call special attention to the achievements and contributions of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders in our community, our state, and our country. And whereas in 1978, Congress created Asian Pacific American Heritage Week in May to coincide with two milestones in Asian Pacific American history: the arrival of the first Japanese immigrants on May 7th, 1843 in the United States, and Chinese workers' role in building the Transcontinental Railroad, completed on May 10th, 1869. And whereas Lakewood's connection to the Asian community goes back decades, from welcoming immigrants to the area as they arrived alongside service members stationed at Joint Base Lewis McChord, to supporting business development and expansion endeavors within the city, and celebrating the many cultures, customs, and heritage of the kaleidoscope of countries from the Asian continent and Pacific Islands represented in our community. And whereas Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders comprise nearly 12% of the city's population, according to the 2020 census, and nationally are some of the fastest growing racial and ethnic groups. And whereas Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders are some of our most devoted community members who serve as leaders in our military and in law enforcement, as experts in the field of science, medicine, and technology, as teachers, as distinguished lawyers, as innovative farmers, as business owners, as nonprofit executives, and as leaders within their community and beyond. Now, therefore, the Lakewood City Council hereby proclaims May 25th, May 2025 as Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month in the city of Lakewood, and we encourage all residents to recognize the vital role Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders play in our community, and urges residents to visit the Asia Pacific Cultural Center to learn more about their programs and commitment to bridge communities and generations through art, culture, education, and business, proclaimed on the 5th day of May, 2025, and signed by the Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and the rest of us on City Council.
Here with me today, our board member, El Cosio, and our staff. On behalf of Asia Pacific Cultural Center, Deputy Mayor, and Councilman, thank you very much for this honor, and we'll continue to do our mission in this region. Thank you so much for this honor.
Get up in front.
Okay. Next on our agenda, we have our business showcase. And for that, I'm going to ask Rachel Goodman and Elizabeth Wilsite to join Councilmember Boki at the podium.
Jeez. With the motto, everybody and everybody, Good Fit and Fit Fight owners Rachel and Elizabeth are dedicated to creating a safe space for all people to live a healthy life without feeling the pressures they could experience at other gyms. Whether it's kickboxing, dance, weightlifting, or anything in between, Good Fit and Fit Fight is improving lives and building their own community here in Lakewood. For this, they are recognized as the May 2025 Business Showcase, and I'll read the certificate. It is recognized as May 2025 Business Showcase because of its community impact both in and out of Lakewood and its dedication to providing a safe space for any individual to live a healthy life, regardless of gender, body type, or preferred exercise method. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You can tell us about your business.
Okay.
Mr. Boki.
Well, thank you so
We have
much.
a
We're
video.
honored and actually speechless because we really were not expecting anything like this. We do this because it's fun and something that we've been doing like our whole lives, I guess. So just being able to be here is an honor. So thank you.
Apparently, we also have a video tonight, so sit back and relax. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rachel Goodner. I am one of the owners here at Good Fit Plus Fit Fight in Lakewood, Washington. We are a fitness studio. We are trying to set the foundation that fitness is for everybody and every body, so every body type. We have 10 total trainers. That's both full on staff regularly and our sub instructors. That is kickboxing instructors, strength instructors, and then group fitness instructors. We are female owned, we are female empowered, but we have males, females, we have youth here, We have older, younger, anyone and everyone who comes through the door is welcome. If you're looking to move your body, we want you in here. This is my business partner. She's coming on camera.
I don't like doing this. I'm proud that people want to be here, not to just work out, right? Like,
Yeah.
come here. We have people who are new to the community that really don't have friends or family in the area, and will tell us that, I'm going to cry with that, that they are our family and friends. And so those things that we can really take for granted because we live here, we forget like that what we do is even beyond like building muscles and fitness for sure.
Next up, we have our beloved Community in Action update. And for that, I'm going to call on Dr. John Scott to present a presentation. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Okay, thank you. Thank you all, and hello, everybody. My name is Dr. John Scott, and I'm going to be talking a bit about beloved community and some of the work we've been doing over the last several months with City of Lakewood. And I want to make sure I'm going to time myself so I don't ramble on past my time, which is 10 minutes. I first wanted to actually thank many folks for this work. I know that I wouldn't be standing here literally if these folks did not exist. And I wanted to talk about, well, one, I'll reintroduce myself. I'm John Scott. I'm also a core faculty member with Antioch University in their doctoral education program, and a senior faculty member with UC Berkeley's LEAD program, Leaders for Equity and Democracy. And then I've been doing this work around beloved community probably for 30 plus years. I think I lost count after a while. But I wanted to give thanks to Dr. Vincent Harding, who is no longer with us, but was a dear colleague and mentor of mine, but also a speechwriter for Dr. King, and did a lot of work, deeply engaged with beloved community. So I wanted to thank him for his work and service. Also wanted to thank Dr. Grace Lee Boggs, who lived to the young age of 100, longtime educator and deeply immersed in beloved community. And I was very lucky and honored to have a chance to work with Dr. Boggs for many years as well. Thich Nhat Hanh, who was also, he was a Buddhist monk from Vietnam and was also dear friends with Dr. King. And then if you ever get to research and look at that up, they had this really great friendship where he was doing beloved community work also till the time he transitioned as well. So just wanted to make sure I thank these folks and would not be here if it wasn't for them. Also wanted to thank Kimmy Irene Ginn for her support and allyship in this work. We spoke about doing beloved community work and actually doing, I was invited to do a keynote, and both Kimmy and I spoke about how we didn't want it just to be this one and done thing. We wanted to make sure that it was ongoing, and that we were doing some practicing and work around beloved communities. So thank you, Kimmy, for all your work. Sally Martinez, who both Kimmy and Sally organized and coordinated and got people into the room for these workshops. And so thank you for your support with that. And the MLK committee was instrumental in getting this done. And so important that I say those thank yous, right? I want to talk about starting with our my keynote. When I was invited to do the keynote for Beloved Community, which was very well attended, the goals for this for this, for me, were really to offer some historical context around Beloved Community, but also share some, it was important to share some narratives and stories about how Beloved Community shows up for me. So community members, like we could invite community members to think about how it shows up for them. So we wanted to invite people to really think about their own relationship to Beloved Community and share some stories about that as well. And then we had three Beloved Community workshops. One was with a group of teenagers, and two of them were groups with adults. There's also council members that came and supported these as well and participated. Y'all, this was on a Saturday, 4 hours on a Saturday. People showed up for these workshops, right? A lot of commitment, a lot of engagement in the room. And so it was they're all really powerful. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what these workshops were about. They're about deepening our understanding and our practice around Beloved Community work. And understanding what is our relationship and understanding of Beloved Community. And then also, what is your vision, desire for Beloved Community for yourself and your community? So these are some of the questions that came up in these workshops. It wasn't just in a linear didactic way. We were practicing and embodying what this would look like, right, in these workshops. And our first workshop was with young people and our amazing, brilliant teenagers. And one of them is there with us tonight. Layla is going to speak about her experience in these workshops as well. We had a 4-hour workshop with teenagers. We integrated movement, theater, creative writing, community dialogue, and envisioning Beloved Community in action. And, you know, one of the exercises was designed to think about what are some words that come up when we think about Beloved Community. And for example, if I say the word community in a room of 40 people, I'm going to get 40 different definitions of what community is, right? So we really explored some of these words. This is what you're seeing here in action with some exercises to not just be talking about it, but showing what it looks like. Some more images of that and engagement. Really, there was a lot of critical thinking during these exercises and a lot of personal stories in connection and relationship with Beloved Community that came up in this workshop. A lot of the young people came up to me after or at the end of the workshop and said they wanted more, right? They wanted more of this and they wanted more practice in doing this work. And I'm going to show some images of our adult workshops. You may recognize some folks that are in this room. All right, this is our adult workshops of Beloved Communities. Something we did in each of these workshops was we had these opening circles where everyone would introduce themselves and talk about their relationships with Beloved Community and also how it shows up for them around issues of identity, around issues of community, family, and it really offered folks a chance to really reflect on their own experiences, but also hear about somebody else's. And so these were really important to have these opening circles in each of our sessions. Another familiar face here. And I call this embodying and practicing Beloved Community. Really, these are set up, these exercises are set up for us to kind of mirror each other and really, you know, folks were kind of shaping each other to talk about their definitions of Beloved Community. And sometimes, you know, when we have somebody mirroring us, they can tell us what we may be missing. And so that came up a lot in these sessions as well. Community as a mirror, right? Deepening our understanding about Beloved Community, some more familiar faces, language and words. And every one of these sessions ended with a vision, folks talking about what their vision was around their relationship with this work, specifically in their communities and their whatever, if it's nonprofits or public facing work, what does it look like specifically? And a lot of the feedback that we got after the sessions were that folks wanted more of this as well, more practice, more conversations, and more engagement. What also came up was folks talking about how a few people shared that they really hadn't been social since COVID, right? And really hadn't been a community practicing how to be in relationship since then. So really needing that engagement is really important. So as far as, you know, what we're envisioning or thinking about, we'd really love for City of Lakewood for concurrence and for more support with this work around Beloved Community. providing more multicultural, multi-generational spaces and engage interactive workshops for adults, teens, community focused on beloved community work. Creating kind of a center for folks. I mean, the work that I'm already seeing tonight with what people have been presenting is, you know, even like the farmers markets and all these engagements are all part of this community, but really having a place to restore, practice, build relationships, and nurture and sustain more beloved community work. And I think City of Lakewood has an opportunity to do that and commit to that. Deepen practices and understanding of beloved community in the City of Lakewood and become a beacon of light for other cities, organizations, communities to learn from and thrive in this work. There's an opportunity to do that. So we're looking for that ongoing support in the work with beloved community. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to call our brilliant student up, Layla, to talk about her experience in the workshop. Let's give her a hand.
Hello, everyone. My name is Layla Geneby, and I'm a senior at Gig Harbor High School, where I serve as president of both the Black Student Union and the Circle of Friends Safe Talk Club for Suicide Prevention. This fall, I'll be attending Northeastern University to study marketing. I'm here today because I want to share an experience that left a lifelong impact on me. Recently, I participated in a workshop led by Dr. Scott in partnership with the Lakewood Beloved Community. It wasn't your typical classroom setting. I wasn't sitting at a desk listening to someone speak. I was up, moving, laughing, and learning alongside other students my age. Through theater, creativity, and real connection, we were guided through personal reflections on identity, struggle, and healing. We processed hard moments from our lives in a way that felt safe, empowering, and fun. I've never experienced anything like it before. It reminded me that healing doesn't always have to feel heavy. It can be joyful. It can be shared, and it can even look like a play. As someone deeply involved in student leadership and mental health advocacy, I truly believe this kind of programming is essential. It gave me new tools to understand myself and others, and it created space for stories that often go unheard in our communities. That's why I strongly recommend this workshop and others like it, not just for schools and communities amongst Lakewood or Pierce County, but for every community amongst Washington State. Programs like these build understanding, connection, and hope. And right now, students need that more than ever. Thank you for your time and for supporting initiatives that truly make a difference in young people's lives. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Layla, for that. And I wanted to just close with, I hadn't planned this, but I was thinking sometimes Dr. Boggs, Grace Boggs, who's since passed away, talks to me. And so she wanted me to give you this, say this to you all, but she would say, one of the quotes that she would say, you know, we need to create more spaces where we become more human beings. And I really believe that these workshops and these spaces around beloved community help us practice to do that. So thank you so much for your support and time with this work, and we're hoping to do more of it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now it's time for our public. We have a question, Dr. Scott, from the Councilmember Branstetter.
Yeah, thank you for appearing here today, Dr. Scott, and for your appearances and activities within the city over the past 4 or 5 months. But I wondered if you could elaborate on, certainly doing workshops, as we've heard the testimony about how they are, but the nature of places is, places was one of the things that you talked about, and I having attended speech and workshops, I understand that, but I'm wondering exactly how multi-generational places fit into the dynamic of achieving the beloved community goal, if you will.
Thank you for that question. It's a great question, and something as you were asking it, I was thinking about, an example of this, or, a bit of an example is the pavilion where we were having these spaces, where we were doing these workshops, where the keynote happened as well. One of the evenings or one of the days we had the workshop, the Beloved Community Workshop, and the next day, that same space was being used as a sound healing meditation space, right? All in the same pavilion. So when I'm thinking about center and spaces, so many things can happen in that space. Also, something that one of the young people actually told me this in the workshop with the teenagers is that they would love to be in community with elder folks and have conversations about community, not just in this insulated, teen group or an insulated elder group, but actually have those groups come together and actually speak and then listen to one another with experiences. So having a physical space could be really powerful, having this pavilion, but also spaces where folks can actually be in community that may not all the time be in conversation or dialogue with one another.
And thank you. It seemed to me that as we embarked this year on the Beloved Community theme, that there was some talk about incorporating some art, some murals and things into that. Is that in your 30 years of Beloved Community work, is that a type of glue that helps?
I think it's definitely something. I'm not a visual artist, so don't ask me to do that. I'm still with stick people. But I know I just got word that we have an artist that's going to be starting a mural, Beloved Community mural, that's going to connect and be in relationship with the work we're doing. So I think visual arts, theater, movement, song, music, all these different pieces are part of that work, that Beloved Community work.
Okay, and what sort of, I hate to use this word, I'm going to use that. What metrics should we use at to decide whether we're successful?
I think it's a great question. We were so excited to get this going. I mean, even just having the keynote and then organizing the workshops, that we're now talking about evaluations and having folks give us, we're getting verbal feedback, but actually having evaluations and feedback of what's missing, what's needed. And so when I'm thinking about metrics, I'm thinking about both qualitative and quantitative data to think about how are folks valuing these spaces? How are things showing up? What are some things that are still maybe getting in the way? And then having that documented, having those, and the numbers of folks that are coming, all those pieces can be part of that metric.
Okay.
And need to be, I think. Yeah.
Conversely, what should we be on the lookout for that's maybe contrary
And
to having a Beloved Community?
yeah, this is it's a great question. We can do a workshop right now about that. No, I'm kidding. No,
You're over your 10 minutes already, but we'll.
Yeah, no, some of the works, that was some of the conversation in the workshop. What does it mean? How do we know when it's not Beloved Community, right? And this is some of the questions we asked in the workshop, and folks were getting very specific about what's gotten in the way, right? So there's lots of different examples of violence in the city, acts of bias and violence and all these different things, but also sometimes it's just organizationally, sometimes we're getting in our own ways in some of these ways. And so really having those conversations as well and doing some work around that and having a practice space to practice how not to make those same mistakes is really important.
Right,
and I think
thank
I'm
you.
over time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay.
Okay, it's now time for public comment, and I want to make you aware that there are two public hearings tonight, public comments. One is under public hearings and appeal, and if you're here to talk about the transportation improvement plan, the comprehensive complement plan amendment, or the multifamily tax exemption, I will call on you under the public hearing and appeals, just so we understand that. So at this point, public comments are accepted by mail, email, or by live, virtual, or in-person comments. Send comments in advance by mail or email to Brianna Schumacher, City Clerk at 6,000 Main Street Southwest, Lakewood, Washington, 98499, or B.S. Schumacher at cityoflakewood.us. Comments received up to 1 hour before the meeting have been provided to the City Council electronically. Please note that there are 3 public hearings this evening. Testimony specific to those topics should be done under the public hearing and appeals. Members of the audience may comment on items related to matters related to city business under the public comment period. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Virtual comments, if you would like to provide virtual comments to public comment, you will need to join the Zoom meeting as an attendee by calling the telephone number 1-253-215-8782 and enter the meeting ID number 868-7263-2373, or visit Zoom US and enter the meeting ID number 868-7263-2373. Upon entering the meeting, please enter your name, use the raise hand feature to be called upon. For those participating by calling in by phone, to use the raise hand feature, you press the *9 on your phone. And when you are unmuted, please provide your name and city residence. Each speaker will again have 3 minutes to speak. Outside of public comment, all attendees on Zoom will continue to have the ability to virtually raise your hands or for duration of the meeting, and you will not be acknowledged, and your microphones will be muted except for when you are called upon. We alternate weeks, so tonight we start first call on those who are on Zoom who have raised their hand to make virtual comments. First hand I see is Christine Minetti.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good evening. My comments this evening are prompted by the article this morning in the Tacoma News Tribune about the case related to the demolition of the Mir Jalili family's house on Lake Steilacoom. This is my family's own neighborhood, so it's a matter close to our hearts. There was no need to do this to the Mir Jalili family. The legalities of the case are completely irrelevant, even though the city, I'm sure, would object that he didn't own the property and that this was the main problem. This should have never happened. An outpouring of neighbors' support for the Mir Jalili family and against the improvements once again had no effect on the city council or its staff in its decision-making. Decisions were made by the city for the city, driven by grants that in this case would be applied to a scrap of a park in an area wholly unsuited to more traffic and visitors. Eminent domaining and demolishing a family's house, how can you do such a thing for a boat trailer parking lot? The city is blinded by grants. The other family whose house was encroaching on 100th Street at the road end there at Lake Steilacoom didn't have it taken away and demolished. If there were real problems, the city needed to work it out in a civilized way that would have allowed the Mir Jalili family to stay in their home. Please never do this or anything similar again to any resident of Lakewood. That was from Christina Minetti on my own behalf, and now I have a comment from the Gary Oak Coalition. Christina Minetti, Gary Oak Coalition. There are also environmental concerns about the Mir Jalili case, which was covered in today's Tacoma News Tribune. As we've said before, this project was completely misguided. The neighbors also expressed their concerns. It will result in increased water pollution, increased air pollution, increased noise pollution, and especially concerning is that Lakewood has Lake Steilacoom listed as priority fish habitat. That's not a place where you want to encourage motorized craft and disturbance to the water, to the air, noise. It's just not good. The runoff makes it, a real problem. The cars that will be in that parking lot, supposedly, where Dr. Mirjalili's house stood, the runoff from the tires contains 6 ppd quinones, which is fish killing. It's known. Look it up. You know, does the proposed parking lot, does it even comply with environmental regulations governing development along shorelines? I mean, that doesn't make sense. A parking lot with, impermeable surface right next to a lake that is priority fish habitat. The boat launch, this area should be restricted to non-motorized craft. People can enjoy this lake as much as they want using kayaks, canoes, paddle boats, rowboats. A boat launch encourages more noise and disturbance of water, disrupting the habitat for the fish, including endangered salmon and waterfowl. It also increases the pollution to the residents in the area because these large trucks are often diesel. I can smell it when they pass by my house up the street about 2 blocks. It is just not good. This should have been left as a quiet bit of public access for the people of Lakewood, not in order to further the city's own activities / existence by utilizing the opportunity to get more grants to do yet more things that are not only unnecessary, but even destructive to the quality of life in Lakewood, destructive to Lakewood's environment, and simply, of course, obviously destructive and tragic for the family whose house you took away and demolished. Please never do anything like this again and make amends for what you've done now. Thank you.
The next hand I see is Dylan Roof.
Yes, hello, council. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, hi. So earlier we were talking about, I believe it was Asian Hawaiian, Pacific Hawaiian, whatever it was, heritage, and I think it's very important that we celebrate the heritages of the various people that inhabit our country. And I tune into these meetings occasionally, and I just never hear of like White European Heritage Month or like celebration month. And I just find it somewhat dishonest where, white Europeans who essentially founded the country and who, many of my ancestors died to create this country. They created the automobile, they created electricity, the computer, your phone, pretty much name it. White people invented it. And I just find it to be disingenuous to celebrate, every ethnic group other than the people that, are the vast majority of the individuals that make up the country. I find it somewhat disingenuous, and I somewhat interpret it as an anti-white attack, or it's supposedly, you're bad, whitey, feel bad. We're going to celebrate everyone else other than you. And I don't think it's fair. And I feel like as a city, here in Lakewood, we could really make some progress by, really, starting to promote, the greatness of the European heritage and the influence they've had on American culture and civilization as a whole. And when you look back at the European people, it goes back thousands of years in their greatness and, their advancements in linguistics. And I would just like to ask the council to maybe consider having like a White European Heritage Month. Or perhaps maybe you could grant an award to myself, Dylan Roof, my friend Brenton Tarrant, my friend Payne Gendron, and Robert Bowers. And I think that if you were to give us around $10 million, I think we could deport like the niggers and shitskins ourselves and instantly make this country.
Yeah. The next person on the call-in is James Dunlop.
Can you hear me?
You can.
My name is James Dunlop, and I'm a resident of Lakewood. And I just essentially wanted to repeat a lot of what Christina Minetti just said, though maybe not as eloquently. But I read that article about Dr. Mir Jalili and how he lost his house, and what the implications of that are. So, as Christina Minetti said, regardless of the legality of him losing his house, the reasons for him losing his house and what the city needed that land for was to build a parking lot for that park. I mean, that is completely unnecessary. And I asked at the various hearings, what is the reason for this? Why this obsession with facilitating large motorized boats on the lake? And there was never really any answer. I mean, I understand that public access is important, and people can bring their kayaks and other small crafts, and they can manually take them to the shore. But to need a parking lot for a small lake, is very small. And the question is why? And I don't think that question of why was never really answered. And it seemed to me that essentially the city were just looking for grants. They wanted to have a reason why they needed to get the grant, another reason to put down concrete. I mean, that is what it's all about. And then, of course, there is the ethics of taking Dr. Mir Jalili's house away for such a trivial reason, regardless of the legality of the thing. Although as I've said on numerous occasions, and I think it needs to be restated, but if Dr. Mir Jalili, for example, had been a white former colonel in the Air Force, I don't think, and he'd been living on that property, I don't think he would have lost his property. I think that there would have been an accommodation. Plus, you talk about community so far. You talk about, your beloved community and all this kind of thing. But really, there's no community in Lakewood. And any community the city tries to create is essentially an ersatz community. And here's a kind of community where a valued community member who is a dentist, he is forming a valuable public role. He's giving his everything to the community. He loses his house and the city doesn't care. And so there's no community in Lakewood. And I think the fact that, he's lost his house really demonstrates that. And the encouragement is, people in Lakewood, they have to watch out. They have to, and when someone gets into trouble, in the end, it's best that they look away, isn't it? Because it might be your house next. So I think it's a real shame.
I just want to remind everybody that there's 2 public hearings, and some of you signed up on both. That's 3, I'm sorry, that's 3. You're welcome to speak at this point, but if you want to speak on the public hearings and appeal, it's the next public comment period. So I call on Mr. Bart Dalton.
There is one other person with their hand raised online.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Madam Clerk, we have a call-inner.
Next,
I'm
we
sorry.
have call-in user 1. Once admitted, please state your name and city of residence.
Are you there?
Hello? Hello?
Hello? You're on.
Call-in user 1, your time has started. Please state your name and city of residence if you'd like to provide comments.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Ann Mueller. I concur with Minetti and Dunlop. It's outrageous what this city did to a compliant, great guy, a dentist, simply living his life. However, let's get back to business regarding the city council and planning hyper-focused on MFTE, multifamily tax exemption. Where is the DOD? Major stakeholder in development of apartments within the city of Lakewood. Thousands of families would love to live in the city of Lakewood that are directly affiliated with JBLM. Let's look at the numbers. 94,000. That's active military is 40,000, and their family members are 53,000 within our region. They would all love to live here, 5 minutes to 10 minutes to JBLM. Where is DOD on mitigation? Developers are operating on a slim profit margin, so we need to give them tax breaks to motivate them to build here. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Keep the Clover Park curve, I call it. The Lakewood shops and the beautiful tea room, let's keep it. Let's keep development reasonable and thoughtful and beautiful. Don't give me a shed roof on Gravely Lake Drive, please. So I ask and I literally beg you to get South Sound military communities up in the mix. Where is Lakewood's chunk of the DOD money to develop for our beloved troops? Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, there are no other virtual hands raised at this time. We
The-
could now
the-
move to in-person comments.
Phone numbers?
There are no virtual hands raised at this time.
Oh, thank you. We'll now do in-person comments. Yeah, okay. Mr. Bart Dalton, did you want to speak at this point? If you're talking about family taxes, you want to wait till the next.
I'll wait for the.
Okay. I think there's a mix-up on this though. Yeah, this is just a public hearing. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to make comments at public comment period? Please come to the mic.
Anything tonight?
So this would be the opportunity to provide any public comment related to any matter of city business. There are 3 public hearings and testimony specific to those public hearings. That should be done during the public hearings portion. So this is general public comments.
Okay. My name is Hobart Hedrick. My wife and I have lived in Lakewood for 32 years. Thank you. My name is Hobart Hedrick. My wife, Virginia, and I have lived here in Lakewood for 32 years. Very happily. We drive up and down Gravely Lake Drive daily, multiple times sometimes. I use the barber shop over there for 25 years. And some of the other businesses. I understand that there's some incentive that the city is considering to have builders tear all that down and put apartments in there. Is that correct? And I guess you can't answer it. Okay. If that's the case, I think it's a terrible idea. There's a lot of places in Lakewood like the QFC, old QFC building. It's a blight, if you ask me. It should be torn down and it's a perfect area to build apartments if that's what you want to do. But to destroy or to promote someone to destroy a viable business district, it's never looked in severe disrepair. There was one building over there that had a problem when the guy retired, but that's all been taken care of. And these are going businesses. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense at all to encourage that to go away. Those are my comments.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Just in terms of a point of order, Madam Mayor, that comment sounded like it could have been related to the public hearing, so we'll say it once more. You can comment on anything you want during general public comments, and the city council will absolutely hear you. But if your comments go to something that has to do with one of the 3 public hearings, and you bring your comment during the general comment time, your comments will not be part of the legislative record or history of the item that's on for public hearing. That public hearing is like a box. None of those 3 boxes have been opened. At some point, each one of them will be opened, and if you have comments pertinent to that project and you want them to be considered by the council as they make their decision, they need to be made in the context of when that box is open. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mussolini, are you wanting to speak at this point?
Yes. Good evening to all of you. I am Ibrahim Mirjalili, resident of Lakewood. Hello, good evening to all of you. I am Ibrahim Mirjalili, resident of Lakewood. Yes, I am the person whose house has been taken and demolished. This house valued about $2 million range by different appraisal. It was basically in a very poor condition for 2 years on the market. We purchased it in 2008 and rehabilitated it. It took us a decade to do it. And they demolished it. Now they are here asking for you to pay to build more houses while they already demolished one that we were living in it. Well, I don't know what is the common sense for this, but I consider it a waste. Of course, we believe that there was more into it. It was racially motivated. I say this because the property at 9012 Edgewater on the north side of the park, actually you want to go and see there are 2 buildings there. One of them was approved by this city to be renovated in about 2020 or so. And at that time actually could be considered a vacant lot because according to their surveyor's map, that structure, that loan structure was sitting on the city right away. Ours, we have had 3 surveyors. All of them say that no part of our structure is sitting on the city right away. And I have there 2 of their map. One was, of course, a witness supporting the other 2. Right here. It was the map of the city was so bad that even their appraisal had to go back and question him because he already valued it as having no shoreline. And of course, it did have a shoreline because there is an agreement of 1922 between Mary Hill and the state of Washington to purchase the shoreline. Well, what happened was we asked, first they came and they brought the allegation of boundary dispute. When they could not deceive us to submit to their track, then they decided to eminent domain it almost 3 years later. And then when we said that, okay, let's establish the boundary line, they were not interested. It took us 6 months to force them by the court order to comply. But when we did that, our attorney changed. Now they were saying we were wasting the time and they wouldn't have our attorney to have time to represent us. Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Mark Pfeiffer. Again, if you want your comments recorded, so you want the public hearings and appeals? Okay. Yeah, I'll call you next. And the next is Kate Real. Okay. Thank you. So at this time, we're going to have our consent agenda, Madam Clerk.
A, approval of the minutes of the city council meeting of May. A, approval of the minutes of the city council meeting of May 5th, 2025. B, motion number 2025-25, authorizing the award of a construction contract to Asphalt Patch Systems in the amount of $207,129 for the 2025 roadway patching project. C, motion number 2025-26, authorizing the award of a construction contract to Sierra Santa Fe Corporation in the amount of $299,777 for the 2025 chip seal program. D, motion number 2025-27, authorizing the execution of an agreement with Gunderson Law Firm for municipal legal services effective May 19th, 2025 through December 31st, 2025. E, motion number 2025-28, authorizing the execution of an agreement with Facet in the amount of $85,106 to design and permit a street end for public water access at the West Lake Ave street end terminating at Lake Steilacoom. F, motion number 2025-29, authorizing the execution of an amendment to the agreement with SMS Cleaning, Inc. in the amount of $63,284 for park custodial services. G, motion number 2025-30, authorizing the execution of an agreement with KBH Construction in the amount of $93,507.93 for improvements to future downtown park site at Motor Avenue. H, motion number 2025-31, authorizing the execution of an agreement with POMIS in the amount of $60,890 to design and facilitate installation of interpretive elements along Fort Silicon Park Nisqually Loop Trail. I, items filed in the office of the city clerk. 1, Lakewood Arts Commission meeting minutes of March 3rd, 2025. 2, Lakewood's Promise Advisory Board meeting minutes of March 6th, 2025. And 3, Planning Commission meeting minutes of April 2nd, 2025.
Are there any items that the
I move approval of the consent agenda.
do I have a second?
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved. So we'll make a, okay. We move to our regular agenda.
First, we have public hearings and appeals. Deputy Mayor, this is the date set for a public hearing on the 6-year 2026 through 2031 Transportation Improvement Program. For this, we have Troy Potwinski, Capital Projects Division Manager.
Good evening, everyone. Before you tonight, we do have the public hearing for the 6-year TIP. It's the 2026 to 2031 Transportation Improvement Program that is done annually per state statute. This year, we're looking at adding 4 projects and removing 4 projects that exist. The program is not a budgetary program as it does have $140 million. That budgetary process is taken care of during your biennial budget. It is a program that is for comprehensive goals related to planning and transportation priorities that you have. We do look forward to hearing any comments. The program was before you last Monday night, the 12th of May. It's been before the Planning Commission prior to that, and we will look forward to adopting it on June 2nd. With that, any comments you received this evening will be evaluated for incorporation into the program. Thank you.
So this is the time for the public hearing and appeals. Public testimony is accepted by mail, email, by live, virtual, or in-person comments. Send the comments in advance by mail or email to Brianna Shoemaker, City Clerk at 6,000 Main Street Southwest in Lakewood, Washington, 98499, or B.S. Schumacher at cityoflakewood.us. Testimonies received up to 1 hour before the meeting has been provided to the City Council electronically. Madam Clerk, would you read any comments received earlier?
Deputy Mayor, we received no testimony in advance of this evening's hearing.
The testimonies are limited to 3 minutes per person. Virtual testimony, if you would like to provide virtual testimony, you may need to join the Zoom meeting as an attendee by calling the telephone number 1-253-215-8782 and enter the meeting ID number 868-7263-2373, or visit zoom.us and enter the meeting ID number 868-7263-2373. Upon entering the meeting, please enter your name. Use the raise hand feature to be called upon. For those participating by calling in by phone, to use the raise hand feature, press *9 on your phone. When you are unmuted, please provide your name and city of residence. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. We will start off tonight with our comments made from our people calling in on Zoom. The first name that I see is Manetti, Christine Manetti.
Hello, can you hear me?
We hear you.
Oh, good. Thank you. This is Christina Minetti, Lakewood. My comment relates to the proposed so-called improvements to Waverly, Edgewater, and Mount Tacoma Drive that are in the transportation plan. My family and I live next to one of these roads and would be directly affected. We have a number of concerns. The first relates to public notice. In talking to neighbors who don't read the council agendas and hundreds of pages of attachments, none knew that there were plans to make sidewalks with lighting, gutter, and bicycle infrastructure here. This may violate a WAC. It may be illegal. My family certainly did not receive any information from the city, much less receive a survey from the city asking whether we were in favor of such so-called improvements. Second, in general, we are strictly opposed to making Waverly and Edgewater a thoroughfare from Mount Tacoma to Steilacoom, as the city has suggested in the past. Our neighborhood's peaceful, relatively unpolluted atmosphere should be maintained by limiting traffic. Third, we have serious environmental concerns about this project. We are opposed to any destruction of trees, especially if protected Gary Oaks for this reason, or any degradation of their conditions, which should only be improved. Another environmental concern is the lighting, which people all over the world are realizing is a problem. The lighting causes problems for humans, see the readily available research I've mentioned before, and disrupts the environment by causing metabolic havoc for the trees and other plants, which the city says it's trying to protect after all, as well as insect life. Recent research shows they don't eat the leaves of plants that have been exposed to light as much as they normally would, and pollinators, reduction of 64% in visits by nocturnal pollinators to plants exposed to nighttime lighting. Fewer insects, you can see, I think it was in The Guardian just today or yesterday. Fewer insects mean less food for birds who have more than enough problems as it is. Around the world, people are working to reduce nighttime lighting, which disorients birds migrating at night. I ask that you use motion sensor lighting. You don't have to have these lights on all the time. With the 6th extinction underway, including an insect apocalypse and billions of birds dead every year, Lakewood needs to prioritize the environment in this and other projects. Think, how can we improve the environment for the trees, the plants, the insects, the birds, and other creatures? Think of everyone else and then think about the humans. We were not asked whether we wanted lighting. We do not. We do not want these improvements. The public has not been consulted, much less informed, and a project like this should require public input and approbation. Thank you for your keen attention to these environmental concerns and those regarding inadequate public notice for this project. I now have a comment from the Gary Oak Coalition nonprofit. Christina Minetti, Gary Oak Coalition. We ask that you prioritize the environment in your plans for so-called improvements to Mount Tacoma Drive and Waverly Edgewater, which appear in your transportation plan as well as elsewhere in the city. Elsewhere, a dozen or so large Gary Oaks, hundreds of years old, have been cut down to make sidewalks on Phillips Road, when on the other side there were no trees to be cut down. This was, as a city employee explained to us, because the grant ended on the side where the Gary Oaks were, and thus they had to be cut down. For another improvement, on Hipkins, a Gary Oak hundreds of years old was cut down for a small roundabout. In planning, the city must prioritize the well-being of the environment in general and these protected trees in particular. The city must also live up to its promise of achieving 40% canopy cover by 2050, which means preserving the large mature trees that Lakewood has. Climate change will make it even more difficult to replace these. There are a number of environmental concerns in the Waverly Edgewater Mount Tacoma projects. There are Gary Oaks that will be potentially impacted on Mount Tacoma Drive and Waverly. There may be adverse effects to their roots from the construction or paving. One expects that the city will plan so that none will be cut down. Conditions for the Gary Oaks should be improved and not degraded further. If there is pavement there, it should be replaced with permeable paving or not paved at all, if possible. It's the hedge side on the back of the holly hedge that should be used for the sidewalk, rather than the other side where there are trees. It's an invasive hedge, after all. Holly and laurel are both invasive. If possible, there are large trees on Mount Tacoma Drive that will almost certainly be cut down. These trees provide nearby residents cooling in summer, block wind in winter, and form a sound barrier from the road, as well as provide air filtration and runoff infiltration ecosystem services. Two substantial deciduous trees on either side of the corner of Mount Tacoma and Meadow would likely be affected by the proposed roundabout. We ask that the city make the environment and Lakewood's trees, particularly its Gary Oaks, a priority in planning transportation projects such as these. No sidewalk is worth a Gary Oak hundreds of years old being cut down, much less a dozen of them. If the city truly wanted to protect the trees, as it says, you would design around them, as is done elsewhere where there are protected trees. See, for example, the Aurora Avenue North project in Seattle or Portland, Oregon. Thank you for working during all of your projects to keep our mature trees and protected Gary Oaks and to improve our environment and quality of life in Lakewood. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Next is James Dunlop.
Can you hear me?
We hear you.
Yeah, my name is James Dunlop, and I'm a resident of Lakewood. So as we know that in America, perhaps especially since the election, science has been under a certain amount of attack, particularly if science contradicts public policy, or maybe even municipal policy. And one needs to allow the science, best available science, to guide what one is doing. And this, of course, relates to the city's plans for sidewalks and lighting, as Christina Minetti has just outlined. Excessive lighting can cause a great deal of damage to the wildlife, and in particular to pollinators. Christina Minetti, she cited The Guardian, and The Guardian got its information from the US Fish and Wildlife Service, and in 2023 they published a report on their website. I don't know how long the US Fish and Wildlife Service will continue for, at least continue in its current form. And it was titled "Dim the Light for Pollinators and Plants at Night." And this article said specifically, a separate study conducted in 2017 also found that nighttime pollinators were less likely to visit plants underneath artificial light, also reducing pollination and fruit produced by the plants. The researchers found that approximately 62% fewer insects visited the plants in a meadow illuminated at light with LED streetlights than a meadow naturally lit by the moon. Okay, so Christina maybe slightly exaggerated it. She said 64%. I think the actual figure is 62%. But I think that sort of illustrates the point that in terms of lighting, you should not be avoiding light wherever possible, because it is causing great damage to the city's wildlife, which the city should be proud of. And then there is, what sidewalks, roundabouts, what they're doing to trees. We've already seen, what happened was it to Phillips near Hatloff when all the oaks got cut down. Why? Because the grant insisted that development had to happen on one side of the street rather than another. So this transportation plan, doesn't seem to have really considered available science, seems to have completely ignored the environment. And at a time when the environment is under pressure from federal government, I think that the city should be setting an example and should be making a better approach or making a better effort to consider science and not just ignore it.
That's all the virtual hands I see raised. Madam Clerk, are there any others?
Deputy Mayor, there are no other virtual hands raised.
Thank you. Then we'll move to in-house. And the first person we have to sign up to talk about the 2026, 2031 six-year plans, Mr. Bart Dalton.
Deputy Mayor, I don't believe anyone's physically signed in to provide those comments.
I'm sorry. He was the last person. And they said no. Janice, I'm sorry, I can't spell you. I can't read your last name.
I think you're reading the wrong list.
Oh.
Yeah, see, that's not it, and that's not it. We were on just the roads.
Oh, there's no one on that.
Correct, that's the only one.
Okay.
For comments related to the 2026 to 2031 Transportation Improvement Plan public hearing.
I'm sorry. And it's not your fault. All the sign-in sheets look alike. And so we're in the process of making sure we call people up at the right time. If you're here for multifamily tax, we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
Okay, so.
So if there's anyone in the audience that would like to provide public testimony on the 2026 through 2031 Transportation Improvement Program, please move forward to the podium at this time. We'll take a line here. If no one is here for that topic, please come.
Good evening again to all of you. My name is Ibrahim Mirjalili. I'm a resident of Lakewood. Regarding transportation, I believe that, as Ms. Menede mentioned, really there is no need to have so much of a wide road at Waverly. That's really not a main road. Where is the main road are the roads that, like Gravelly Lake, that end up in I-5. This council failed to have that road wide enough to have access, but now wants to build a lot of building downtown here, which they would need better access to the I-5, which they won't. So they have to spend more money to redo the job they already did. Another thing I noticed, many of the roads that they have built, they are only for one car to each way to go. They didn't leave anything for maybe a bicycle that somebody maybe could drive to go to the park, and likewise, they destroy our home for the park. And they have very wide pedestrian in some areas, which is not really needed unless if you want to have somebody to ride on the pedestrian walkway rather than on the road. These are some of the things that I see, and I do not make any sense out of it. Of course, there is a lot of things that I don't make sense of it. Like as Christina mentioned, on 100th Street end, there are 2 homes that they are encroaching at the waterfront. Well, what had happened when we were kicked out of our home, both of them, they submitted application to vacate and close it to the public. Of course, public protested and stopped that thing. But besides that, what had happened was that that road is 86 feet linear feet wide. They could have moved that boat launch over there if they wanted, and they could reduce the traffic. They don't want to think. They just want you to pay, and they waste. What can you do? That they accused us of wasting the money on attorney fees of your tax money. No, it's incorrect. We also had to spend money to fight back for not only us, but also for you, so they never do it again to anybody else. At least there'll be a lesson over on this. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else that wish to make comments under the 6-year comprehensive plan, transportation plan? Okay, then we would declare that public comment hearing closed. Next, we have the public hearing on the 2025 comprehensive plan amendment. And for that, we're going to call on Ms. Tiffany Spears, our planning manager.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor and members of the council. This item starts on page 118 of tonight's packet. And just to speak very briefly to it, this was discussed at length at last week's study session with you. And it was a joint discussion, if you recall, with Planning Commission members who just recently provided the recommendation to you. All of the 14 numbered, but 12 in total amendments are again included in the packet in full. There are a few changes, as was mentioned last week, that were done in accordance with recommendations from either WashDOT or the Washington Department of Commerce, or through the partnership that was developed with other local jurisdictions for 2025-01 through SHAPE. So all of that is in front of the public tonight for public hearing. Otherwise, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? Yes. Okay, so the first person I have signed up is Tracy Pearson.
Trisha Parsons.
I feel like she signed in, but he didn't choose to speak. You have the opportunity to do so if you like. Feel right, Chief? Then we go to Christine Minetti.
Hello again, Christina Minetti, Gary Oak Coalition. The comprehensive plan updates this year seem not to include amendments to correct Lakewood's deficient critical areas ordinance. As we mentioned repeatedly during the 10-year update in 2024, Lakewood's critical area ordinance allows for the net loss of critical areas in the city, which is explicitly forbidden under GMA. Lakewood does this by not considering Gary Oaks to be critical areas whenever they are, though the WDFW management recommendations clearly state that even single oaks, especially in urban or urbanizing areas, can be deserving of protection, as confirmed by that agency's habitat biologist. In fact, the city even removed the wording, I believe, that urban or urbanizing areas like Lakewood are to be considered specially. The city allows net loss because it does not require true mitigation, which is impossible. They take the money and they put it in the bank, and then we don't hear anything about the mitigation, which would be impossible anyway because these trees take hundreds of years to get large. The city also allows oak woodland to lose protections as a result of subdivision. Oak woodland can be subdivided out of existence. The city also allows the loss of critical areas as the result of permitting oak destruction. Please expand your comprehensive plan amendments to include corrections to the critical areas ordinance, which very unfortunately allow the destruction of Gary Oak woodland, Gary Oak single oaks, even when they should be considered critical areas. Thank you very much.
That's all the hands I see. City Clerk, do you see any other hands raised?
Deputy Mayor, there are no other virtual hands raised at this time.
Thank you. So we go with in person. And we have those taken care of, so thank you. So we're going to declare a public hearing closed at this point on the comprehensive plan program. Okay. And this is the date set aside for the public hearing on the multifamily tax exempt residential target areas. Please go, Mr. Jeff Remack, would you please come forward?
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Council. Tonight before you is the public hearing for the multifamily tax exemption, which we spoke about at the last study session. Three primary items when we look at that. One is the expansion of the proposed RTA, the proposed extension for 12-year allowed extension that can be done per the RCW to extend the time. And then the other is a confirmation in terms of code cleanup for knowing exactly when they can apply. We spent quite a bit of time on this before, but if there are any questions.
Mr. Branstetter.
I'm just trying to look 2 weeks ahead to the future. And so there are a couple of items in the RTA expansion or non-expansion that are of and the subject of public conversation and comment. There was a recommendation that was submitted by the Planning Commission. And there was a chart that reflected where there was a variance between the Planning Commission's recommendation and the staff recommendations. So I'm wondering, as we start and looking ahead to June 2nd, the agenda item, is it going to align with the Planning Commission recommendations? Or is it going to align with the staff recommendations? Or is it going to be something yet to be crafted based on what we hear in the public hearing tonight? And what I'm really wondering is, where in the realm of needing to amend or not amend the agenda item in 2 weeks is going to be. So what are we going to see as the agenda item that when we on the council say we move adoption is actually going to be with, if it's, or that needs to be amended?
That's not actually something we can say at this time, because the public comment when we look at it is to hear exactly for the input. This is not an open and shut case of where we're at. We have the recommendation we brought forward during the study session, which was the expansion to include the CBD to cover the zone to make them match up, but it's not a decided yet. That's why we're having the public hearing at this point.
So it'll be addressed in one way or the other, and then we'll have to deal with it on June 2nd as to whether it needs to be changed or not.
Correct, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone in person that would like to comment on the
So Deputy Mayor, we'll start with those who have raised their virtual hands on Zoom this evening for testimony on the multifamily tax exemption residential target areas, and then we'll move to those who are here in person. First, the virtual hand we have raised is Christina Minetti.
Mr. Branstetter?
Normally, when we have had an item where there has been written comments submitted, we at least get a list of names and the number of comments that there were, and I understood that there were written comments submitted around this public hearing topic. And so if we could just get a summary of the number and the last names of the people that have all submitted written comments, even if they may not be here today?
Madam Clerk, would you read the names?
Yes, Deputy Mayor, the City Council received written testimony in advance of the meeting from Cindy Gardner, John Gardner, Courtney Greenlaw, Earl Greenlaw, Diane Hubble, Walter Neary, Linda Sheehan, and Carol Starr.
Thank you. So now we'll move to in-house. I did.
Christina Minetti, virtual comment.
Hello, can you hear me?
We hear you.
Hello, Christina Minetti, Gary Oak Coalition, Lakewood. Our organization advocates for the preservation of Gary Oaks, which are supposed to enjoy special protections in the state of Washington and in Lakewood. We urge you not to approve the tax incentives for the area along Gravelly Lake Drive before Nyanza and from the shopping center. The tax incentives would encourage types of development there that are inappropriate for that area. The area along Gravelly Lake Drive is a stretch of the main road in Lakewood that showcases old, beautiful, and protected Gary Oaks in Lakewood. They contribute to a special atmosphere in downtown that should be preserved and habitat that should be enhanced. It is not enough to simply save these special Gary Oaks, a keystone species, if new buildings are built, without regard to ensuring that they have the conditions necessary to thrive. These trees, even 400 years old, or maybe even more, need to be considered first when planting in Lakewood. They need to be made a priority, as the term critical area would suggest. A WDFW habitat biologist has said that every Gary Oak in Lakewood should be treated as such and invited you to call him to discuss. Did you? Recently, new apartments were built to the north and south of Gravelly Lake Drive, close to where it meets Steilacoom Boulevard. On one side, some of the largest Gary Oaks on the property, hundreds of years old, were cut down, and others had their critical root zones paved over, right up to the trunk. On the other side, the developer paved right up to the trunks of several Gary Oaks, and others were cut down. Both there and at the neighboring property, which made the top 10 list of apartment complexes, calling 911 a couple of years ago, incidentally. The city pleaded helplessness because the developer was vested under the old and very bad code, but the code also allows for director's discretion, and this did not have to be allowed. The playground could have been on the side of the Oaks, so no damage needed to have been done. The parking could have been underground, but the developer pleaded that this would only have been too costly. Where is the evidence? Where are the teeth behind the city's talk of environmentally conscious development? I just want to ask on behalf of the nonprofit that the city thinks more creatively and ensures that when there is development, not only are the trees preserved, but they have to be preserved in a way that does not ensure that they eventually die, even decades down the road, because these are very long-lived trees. And if they're damaged, or if their roots are damaged now, we might not see, probably won't see the damage for decades down the road, even when most of us will be dead. So please protect the trees. Do not have the tax incentives for this area that would just encourage more development, and do what you can to think of the environment first. I have a second comment from myself. Christina,
Go ahead.
Christina Minetti, Lakewood. I ask that you not approve the tax incentives for the area along Gravelly Lake Drive. I grew up in that neighborhood on Ponce de Leon Creek, where my parents still live today. The kind of development that these proposed tax incentives would encourage would affect my family directly. The multifamily zoning was a mistake in the area across from Clover Park High School, which of course could be reversed if there was the political will, or were the political will. Nevertheless, as it is, because of the protected Gary Oaks there and the wonderful atmosphere, the area should be preserved as a pleasant and welcoming area for both locals and tourists alike. A showcase, a real gem with interesting and quaint shops and institutions that would attract people from near and far. Make Lakewood an interesting and beautiful destination again, not an environmentally devastated landscape full of cheap and ugly affordable housing, which is the trend that we are seeing today. That area along Gravely Lake Drive used to be one of Lakewood's best, with a special atmosphere created by the many Gary oaks along the road and the area's anchor, the wonderful Tensler Library, demolished last September. You know, it was so important to so many people, and impassioned pleas were completely ignored by the city. I know they say it's not theirs to decide about, but they could have influenced the situation. The Clover Park shops are a historic complex that should be preserved, rehabilitated, and restored as a special place that they once used to be. Instead, the city of Lakewood has referred to them matter-of-factly as underutilized. See the city council meeting of October 14th, 2024. Get rid of them then. Fill the space with too many apartments wherever possible, which is of course bad for the salmon-bearing Clover Creek underneath and our human quality of life too. Who is on the side of Lakewood's residents and the environment? Clearly not the city. The city repeats that the mandates regarding affordable housing are a force from outside, one that they are helpless to counteract. This is not true. Others are pushing back. Is it just the grants that you're afraid of losing? Grant-driven decisions have clearly already caused enough damage. Look at Edgewater, Hipkins, and Phillips Road. The city needs to stop being afraid that the developers will go elsewhere if they require them to plan in a way that avoids negative environmental impacts and degrading the quality of life in the city in general. The city needs to be the one in charge, not the developers. We want Lakewood to be developed in an environmentally responsible way, not the way that we have been observing around town in recent years. Thank you for your serious consideration of these matters. Think of the residents, our quality of life, our established neighborhoods, and the environment. Think of these first, and the developers and their agendas only second. Lakewood is its people and its environment. You are here to look out for us. Thank you very much.
Next, we have James Dunlop.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you.
Okay, my name is James Dunlop, and I'm a resident of Lakewood, and I would suggest that it is a bad idea to have this tax exemption. I mean, in a broad sense, you know, I wonder how much evidence there is to indicate that tax exemptions actually work in terms of what, you know, what their intention is. You know, I mean, there is a lot of studies on tax exemptions, and I assume that those considering it are looking at objective sources. You know, I know the sort of certain governmental and municipal agencies might be all in favor of it, but you know, is it really such a good thing? And I think that there is also an issue with tax exemptions of agency, and with the city, there seems to be this suggestion that the city doesn't have any agencies, that there are forces beyond its control which it can't really do anything about. And certainly that's the message we've been getting, certainly from the mayor. But you know, I wonder if that is really the case. You know, as Christina Minetti has mentioned, there are examples on the West Coast, for example, in California, and indeed in Washington as well, of cities fighting back against diktats from state government about the necessity of having a certain amount of units of affordable housing. And then and one wonders what pressure is on cities. Is it that they need to have a certain amount of units of housing in order to get grants? I mean, that is always a possibility. But as far as tax exemptions are concerned, you know, I think as others have mentioned, if you are going to use tax exemptions, then they should be used to encourage development in particular areas, and that you should be mindful of the interests and interests of current residents of the city. I mean, there are in Lakewood plenty of places which have been used in the past, just concrete expanses. They just lie empty. Sometimes they get turned into car washes, for example. Sometimes they get turned into temporary. Well, no, temporary library. I don't quite know what the temporary library is. I mean, that's an example. So there are places where it might be desirable to have affordable housing, and you can do that in such a way that protects the environment. I mean, I know you say, well, we can't do that because we've got the owner to think about. Well, you eminent domain Dr. Mujalili's house. I'm sure there are other concrete expanses that can be eminently domained if you can't get hold of them. But you have to think about what you want. And I don't think that affordable housing in this, the tax exemption in the area that is proposed is going to be in Lakewood's interest, and it's certainly not going to be in the interests of Lakewood's natural environment.
Okay, that's all the raised hands I see. Madam Clerk, are there any other?
Deputy Mayor, there are no other virtual hands raised at this time.
Then we'll start with calling from our list of public comments that signed in, and we can start with Mr. Bart Dalton.
I was getting used to my name being called. It was kind of interesting. Thank you for hearing me. By our understanding, the state and therefore the city are set on encouraging tax relief benefits to apartment developers to revitalize sections of our communities. The focus of the cities should be in areas that need development to improve use and eye appeal from the street. Gravelly Lake Drive is not falling apart, nor is it underused by businesses. We need to not encourage destroying the flavor of one of our entrances to our downtown. There are many places in Lakewood that need our help, that are more suitable for our focus. Springbrook, Lakeview, parts of Bridgeport, etc., need our help. Please explore these and other locations to help our city and leave our entrance to Lakewood alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Although you signed up, Ms. C.A. Phillips, you signed up not to speak, but you're welcome to do so.
Good evening. I've been a resident of Lakewood since 1990. And I've seen many great developments, mainly our park in Stilcombe. What bothers me is the term affordable housing. I think it's misrepresented. It's subsidized housing, the tenants of which have no skin in the game. Each of us residents of Lakewood have skin in the game. The old library was a magnet for the homeless. The new library is a magnet for the homeless. That's another issue that's not being addressed. And when you get a population that has no skin in the game, like tenants of an apartment building, you got a problem. I spent 24 years in corrections. I know what this can stymie. And it's a situation that really needs a sober looking at as to what we want to establish in our community. And that's in a nutshell what I have to comment about.
Thank you. Janice Campbell.
Finally. There's a cell phone here. Is it anybody's? Okay. Yours. Yeah, green? Oh, yours.
No, we'll just take
Somebody's. My name is Janice Campbell. I came here in 1967 as a petulant 50-and-a-half-year-old with my parents and 7 other siblings from Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. Think of it in January to here, January. Quite a contrast in weather. I thought this was the biggest armpit that anybody could have dropped me in until June came. And June came. June came and it was beautiful, and I've loved it here ever since. My parents bought a home that's half a mile away. all my sisters and I and brothers could walk to school. The 2 or 3 days after we arrived, we all toddled down to J.C. Penney at the Villa Plaza, and Dad bought 10 winter jackets for us, winter coats for us. We toddled to the other end of the Villa Plaza at the Soini's family shoe store and got closed-toed shoes. We bought nylons and tights and gloves and hats and things like that. My point being, we do not need apartments. We don't need boxes set on top of boxes to house people. I know you work hard, and I've seen UP do it, University of Place do it, but entice businesses, not just LLCs who are looking to make money and avoid paying property taxes for 8 to a dozen years. Please work harder to get businesses here like it used to be. Please do not sully Gravity Lake Drive. There are many areas in Lakewood that need attention, and they've been brought up in this venue before me and before other meetings. So I would ask you, as a resident of this city in the last 58 years, to please reconsider this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. James Guerrero.
Thank you, City Council. My name is James Guerrero. I live in Lakewood. I am a longtime Lakewood resident. I am an architect here. I do work on multifamily housing. But I'd like to present a differing view on what we're seeing here today. So I think all of us can see we have a housing problem, right? You look outside, we see homeless people, we just see the problems, we read it in the papers. We don't have enough housing. I think that's pretty clear. And so what are we going to do about it, right? The state in their wisdom tells us we need about 1 million more residential units in the state in 20 years. 1 million more residential units. And we can see already that we're in trouble now. We don't have enough places for people to live. So what are we going to do about it? I personally kind of take a bigger view of it, and I think, well, where should we put these people that are coming here? Should we put them in the rural areas? Should we put them in our natural areas? Or should we put them in the developed areas? And my answer is the developed areas, right? If we have in our cities, we have the services that they need. We have hospitals, we have shopping, we have the places that support density. That's really what we should be focusing on. We shouldn't be excluding them from our urban areas. We should be collecting them in our urban areas to preserve the rural areas and keep their characters. I know I am a longtime Lakewoodite. I do love the city. It has a lot of qualities that I really like about it. But I also like to go up and hike on Mount Rainier. I also love driving in the countryside. If we as a city don't take this development in, we're effectively saying it's not for us. You make that happen somewhere else. So we currently have, specifically the MFTE is looking at expanding to encompass the area that's currently designated as a CBD, which is a central business district. By its nature, that is a high density area. That's our core of our city. That's where our density should be focused. I don't want to give the impression that I want to tear down the trees there. I don't, but this is the place that we should be focusing our development. So the MFTE expansion to match the CBDE or the MFTE expansion to match the central business district makes sense. I'm a little surprised it didn't actually align originally because we're saying that's where our density should be. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, looks like Fran Fallon.
Deputy Mayor, Council. My name is Fran Phelan, and I live over in Clovercrest. My comments are more on what I have heard. Now, they're not based on fact, but this is what I've heard, is that there is an incentive for the construction companies to be exempt from their taxes for 12 years. I want to know how I can be exempt from my taxes for 12 years. Anyway, if this project actually goes to fruition, you're going to tear down a bunch of buildings. What are you going to do with all those businesses that are in them? If I had a business in there and the town came through and wiped out that building to build multiple family homes or what housing, whatever it is, I'd take my business, if I could, someplace else, even if it was out of spite. So those people are not going to return. They're going to go someplace else. I also understand that there's no parking. Gravelly Lake Drive is a death trap. Nobody is going to park on Gravelly Lake, so they're all going to park on the side streets. What about all those residents on the side streets? Now they've got a gazillion cars parked on the side streets so that people have parking. If this does come to fruition, there needs to be parking. But I ask you to please reconsider this, because it's going to send business away from Lakewood, not attract business. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next person I have is Robin Ferguson. You chose not to speak, but you have an opportunity to do so if you'd like. Okay, so John Burns.
John Burns. I live here in Lakewood on Alpharetta Street, resident for about 2.5 years. I'm not a big proponent of the multifamily tax exemption program. Like anything, it's probably got some good points and maybe not so good points, and implementation is an issue. But just the whole premise that somehow the citizens of this city is going to have to pay the price of not having taxes come into this community. And it's the same for the county and this and wherever else the taxes get distributed to schools, whatnot. I'm no expert in this, but so in general then is what we're doing is providing somebody an opportunity to speculate on property in which to develop, to speculate, because some of the risk that they take as business people is now gone away because they don't have taxes to pay. So that allows people to go, oh my gosh, what happened to my mic? Well, I don't know, seems like it's quieter. But anyway, it allows speculation, and that's not a good thing. Okay, that a lot of people talk about socialism, right? Socialism and how that's not a good thing. Well, guess what? When you provide funds to builders, right? Builders and reduce their risk, they're going to take more risk. Okay. And then these properties, they can be resold. So even if you get one, and you get a good deal on it, hey, believe me, you can resell that. That is worth some money. So one, it's coming out of our pockets. Okay. And somehow that money that we don't get as a community, well, you know how governments normally work. Somebody's going to pay for that. When the money goes down, somehow there will be tax raised to take care of all that. I have seen nothing from this city that shows the cost of this program if it's fully implemented. Nothing. No cost benefit ratios, nothing. No plan over time, nothing. Okay. Yet all I've heard is that we need to do this. Well, the simple fact of the matter is I've read the RCW and the city's not required to bring multifamily tax exemption units into the city. They're just required to plan for that. So that if we did get 20,000 new residents, that there would be a plan in place where it could implement. Yet it's disingenuous by the mayor and some of the other people that have spoken on this subject here in this room, that somehow we're required to do this. That's not true. That's just not true. It's to somebody's benefit to do that. Is it to you? That's the question you got to ask yourself and the council. Thank you.
Although you chose not to speak, I'm giving you an opportunity. Cindy Gardner, if you choose to speak, please come forward. No. John Gardner's. Okay. Ms. Davis? Is it Wayne Davis? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble reading the. Okay. Cindy Cleveland?
So you probably recognize me from the last time I was here. I came back to plead the fact that we don't want these apartments where the Clover Park shops are. As a town, we elected you to work for us. And I am surprised to see that the mayor's not here, but he said that I needed to come and talk to the state representatives because it wasn't you guys that made these decisions. But as the gentleman said, it is you that makes these decisions. It is your decision. You can shake your head no, but it really is your decision. The town of Stillicum doesn't have these places. So it is your choice. And you do work for us. We elected you to represent us, the people of Lakewood. So that's what we're asking you. We don't want this. We live in a town that is made up of a quaint, it's a hometown charm-filled little town. It's lakes, it's woods, it's Lakewood, it's animals. It's not University Place where you drive up the hill and it's all gigantic buildings like what it is now. That's not what we want. We don't want that. We want to stay what it is now. There's lots of places that you can build off of Bridgeport Way, South Tacoma Way. All of those places need to be regenerated. Why do you have to ruin, like what he said, the main entrance into Lakewood? That's what I said when I was here the last time. I don't understand why you would even consider doing such a thing. I just don't get it. We don't want this. And we're begging you people to listen to us. That's all we want. We just want you to listen and act on our behalf. So that's what we elected you to do. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the ones that I have signed up to speak, if you choose to speak. Is there anyone else who would like to? Line up over here by the podium then, and then.
Yeah, well, for those of you who would like to provide comments, please start making a line here. We will go through those.
Yeah. Approach the podium and give your name and residence, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Trisha Imholt Parsons. I'm a Lakewood resident basically from birth. I did want to quickly shout out the Lakewood Police Department for what seems like an increased presence around town. I've noticed it and I really appreciate it. And thanks for stepping up those efforts there. If you guys have, it's awesome and it's good to see them on the roads. But I'm here again to talk about the MFTE and the RTA tax expansion. My hope is that you guys will reject the proposed tax exemption expansion along Gravity Lake Drive. This is as a lot of people have mentioned, there's going to be a lot of repeating, but it's a serene, well-established neighborhood and it's already thriving. It doesn't need to be further incentivized for development. Instead, let's focus on revitalizing areas that truly need growth. Smart development should uplift underdeveloped parts of Lakewood, not disrupt its most cherished spaces. Preserving established neighborhoods is essential for maintaining the character and appeal that attract residents and visitors alike. These areas are the backbone of Lakewood's community, offering stability and a sense of place. Pushing development into these neighborhoods not only risks disrupting their unique charm, but also undermines the qualities that make Lakewood special. The area in particular is home to old growth trees, gentle creeks, and natural landscapes. Honestly, I'm sure you guys have driven through there. It's like watching a classic Disney movie in real life. And I just think taking advantage of this specific area for a tax exemption, it doesn't make sense. And I think that the decisions that City Council should focus on are expanding areas that truly need it. I think expanding here is really for short-term gains. Ignoring the broader impact on Lakewood's growth strategy, thoughtful planning means investing where it matters, not where it's easiest. The voices of Lakewood residents are being drowned out by legislative decisions that prioritize expansion over preservation. Our community deserves representation that listens and acts in our best interests. We need the City Council to stand up for us, protect our established neighborhoods, and prioritize growth where it's needed, not any growth, good growth. Thank you.
Next.
Now that the box is open. My name is Hobart Hedrick. I lived in Lakewood with my wife for 32 years. I'm very happy here. I come to ask you not to approve this tax exemption. I don't know what the zoning is. Maybe they could do it anyway, but certainly it's wrong to encourage something like this where we have viable businesses, have been there for years. They're still there. There's plenty of other areas. If you've got some money, I encourage building QFC along Bridgeport. I can think of some other areas, but not just like that. Anyway, it just is a bad idea. Please don't encourage the destruction of something that's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening again. My name is Ibrahim Mir Jalili. I'm a resident of Lakewood. Regarding this multifamily housing and also providing incentive to developers. I don't know why developers, when they build buildings somewhere else, they can make money, but when it comes to the city, then they want tax breaks. That's one. Of course, I do believe that everybody deserves a home to live. Of course, considering that we have been cleansed from ours, we can understand it. But what I cannot understand, and I don't know if this council ever cares about it, is that this city's residents are punished two ways. One, by the businesses that they are no longer there to be paying excise tax, and two, by being forced to subsidize the developers to build housing that only brings more crowding, more crimes, and that's, of course, I can see that this seems to be something that cities knowingly or unknowingly they follow by having a concentration of the people who are poor in one area and basically ruin that area, using the taxpayers' money and creating a crime center. Thank you.
Mark Pfeiffer, Lake City neighborhood.
a lot of people have gotten up here and talked about the environmental and aesthetics of this entire issue, and I'm not going to reiterate what they've said because they've done it very well. A couple of people have mentioned some of the fiscal impact. And the lady, I don't recall her name, from Clover Crest, said, how is she going to get a tax break? And the answer is she's not, because she is, and everybody else in this room, whether you're a renter or you own your home in fee simple, you're going to pay for it. Because I don't think that the city has excised anything out of its budget to compensate or to offset the lack of revenue that would come to the city were it not for the MFTE. You know, we're going to pay for it. And I'm just really, really happy that Olympia decided in its wisdom to deep six the 3% increase and hold everybody to 1%. And I'm sure that 1% is going to be fully, if this MFTE is allowed and developers take advantage of it, you know, that's what's going to happen. You're not going to cut anything out of the budget, because the budget, those are the services that you provide to your residents, the people that elected you, you know. So that's pretty much, gosh, I can't believe it. I didn't use all my time. I should take notes or bring notes, but my wife's right behind me and she's going to have some more things to say. Yeah, it's, and, oh yeah, I know what the last part was. There are some of you here on the council, Mr. Bucky and Mr. Brandstetter, Mayor, Deputy Mayor Moss, they were around when the Barker property PDA overlay was hammered down. And what did we get for affordable housing? Houses that started at around $890,000 down at Harbor Cove. That's what we got, you know. So think about that, and think about where you're going to cut money out of the budget to pay, you know, because otherwise the rest of us are going to pay for it. Thank you.
Kate Reed. My husband obviously did a very good job. I was born and raised here. My grandfather bought our property in 1920. I've lived in Lakewood, except for my career in San Francisco, came back here on purpose and to create a business district and then try and put in more of affordable housing. And I've seen what's going in Lakewood. It's in 10 years, you might as well rip it down. It's just not a good idea. Plus, I started thinking about traffic on Gravelly Lake Drive. We don't have transit here. I mean, in San Francisco, you have transit. In Portland, you have transit, but we're not doing this the right way. We should be concentrating in the areas of town that really, really need it. We've got a high school here. We have no idea what kind of affordable housing is going to be housed there. Living in Lake City, I know that there's people that we don't want near our schools. And we need to think about our young people and our housing. The other thing, as Mark said, the multi-tax exemption will decrease the amount of tax revenue over 8 or 12 years. That lessens your budget, and who's going to pay for it? The businesses here, they're little businesses. We need to embrace our little businesses. It makes a community. We talked about community before this in previous evening with Dr. Scott. So let's think about our community and what we have. It's changing, and I embrace change, but I think that multifamily housing on Gravelly Lake Drive is a mistake. Thank you.
Ben Clark, I'm a Lakewood resident for the last 10 years, Deputy Mayor, Council. I'm not going to say anything that hasn't been said before. In 3 minutes, you're not going to relitigate the issues. I just want to say this. When I retired from the military in Virginia, my wife and I chose to live in Lakewood, chose to come back to return to Lakewood. We could have lived anywhere. We didn't choose anywhere else but Lakewood. And we chose Lakewood because of the quality of life and the idea that it was not giving in to trendy directives from the state, but it was going to maintain a certain quality of life and a certain sense of who and what Lakewood is without radical change. And what I see here represents the potential for radical change. I don't believe that incentivizing developers this way is practical or sound. And in fact, it offends me. I think we should consider the needs and the words and the desires of Lakewood citizens and residents. And I'm also, frankly, a little offended by the notion that this is a done deal, that it's state directed and that we have no power, no will, no ability to fight. I'm not in that fight. You are, the city is, but I'd ask you to look hard at what the residents have said and what Lakewood is about. I don't think this is one to roll over on. I don't think you can look at the state and say, it's their problem, they're putting it on us, we can't do anything about it. This is a worthy fight, and I think, frankly, if it comes to pass that developers are incentivized through tax exemptions and apartments are built where Clover Park businesses are and along that stretch of Gravelly Lake, I'll vote with my feet. I wouldn't want to be a part of living in an area where that kind of radical change is forced on the residents and citizens against their will and against their desires. And I don't fundamentally understand the mindset that says, well, we've just got to give in. It's a worthy fight, and I'd ask you to look and look again at what can be done to push this off. And I think 3 weeks ago, I heard the mayor say, take it to the state. Okay, citizens can do that, residents can do that. And I ask the same of the city. Find a way to push back on this. This makes no sense. And I'm offended by developers' tax incentive exemptions for multifamily housing on Gravelly Lake Drive. It offends every sense of me. And I wanted to share that. Doesn't change the argument. And there's a lot of analytical work and a lot of fact finding and a lot of process issues. I understand that. But let's get after it and push back against it. It's not right.
My name is Karen Burns. I'm a Lakewood resident, and I also own a business in Clover Park Shops. I opened my business almost 4 years ago in this quaint little building that I absolutely adore. It's a small shop with great people, some of who have been there 20 years. After we opened the shop here, I was living in Enumclaw. I was making the drive every day. We made the decision because of my shop to buy a home here. I now live a mile away. I can walk to work. I can walk down Gravelly Lake. I can walk the back way, which I love doing. But my concern is you approve something like this and you take out the businesses, you might take out the businesses that are on Gravelly Lake now. You're going to increase the traffic. You're going to take away some of the older buildings that are on that drive that have been there for a long time. If my building were to be torn down, number one, I would have to move out. I would have to find a place that I could afford. You put a new building in, the rent's going to be 2, maybe 3 times as much. I wouldn't be able to stay open. There's no way I could stay open. I would be making no money, as well as all the people in that building would be making no money. We looked a long time before we found a place that was affordable, that was a nice place. And that's why we ended up here. I don't want to move. I want to stay where I am. The tax incentives, I understand the reason for it. You want to pull developers in here to build housing for the city. I get that. I understand that. But you have no way to cover that except for us. We would cover that. I can't afford to pay any more taxes. I just sent the IRS a ton of dough today that
I didn't want to do, but I do it because it's my obligation as a citizen of the United States to pay my taxes, and I do. I just don't want to cover the taxes for a developer who's already making millions of dollars a year on developments all over the place, not just here, Seattle, Tacoma. I don't know where they build. I don't really care. Tax incentives are not a good idea, not for here, not for anywhere as far as I'm concerned. I don't know why cities do it. I don't know why citizens across the United States allow it to even happen. It's a bad idea. Please reconsider it. Please think about the people in this room. Please think about the people that couldn't even be here in this room to tell you how they feel about it because they couldn't get here because they don't have a car, because they can't afford a car, and they sure as heck can't afford any more taxes. Thank you.
My name is Steve Hibbs. I've lived in Lakewood since 1994, and I'll close with a brief summary and ask a favor of you. As you consider the tax exemption area, I would ask that you not study it on a computer screen, but that you get on your bikes, into your cars, or on public transportation, each one of you, and travel the city from end to end. It's May, and Mother Nature has put a bright yellow flag on everywhere where you should be considering building multifamily housing, and it's where you see Scotch broom. It is not where you see oak trees and old growth. So I would ask that you think about raising the floor and not pulling down the ceiling. Thank you.
Yes. Question. We do not dialogue during public comments. If you have a question, the city clerk, we'll take it on advisement.
Okay. I will begin by saying that I volunteer in a food growing garden in the hilltop of Tacoma. We're on between 14th and 15th and G.
Public testimony on a specific public hearing, and I believe you've already provided testimony. If you'd like to, I can help you out to the side of it.
Well, I have a question about the zones of opportunity.
Require me to come ask the question because they don't do it as part of the hearing.
Okay.
Is there anyone else that wish to make public comment in reference to the tax exempt?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Kimberly Peyton Clark. I was born in Lakewood in 1959, so I've been around a couple of days. My husband and I returned after 30 years of being gone to come back to Lakewood. I live on Gravely Lake Drive, and I'm here to tell you that the turn lanes, because of the way the traffics are set up now, has become a passing lane, and it's no longer safe to take a turn into my driveway. So if you fill that whole area with public housing, it's going to get even worse. So I'm really sentimental. I can remember going to the pharmacy to get a Green River. I can remember watching all the iterations of Villa Plaza. And I would just encourage you to think about how we support the businesses here. And giving a tax break to developers does not make fiscal sense to someone who's not very smart with numbers, because we're getting rid of owners of businesses and we're giving tax breaks. I'm not really smart with numbers, but it just seems not to make a lot of sense. And I would just ask that you explain that to me in a way I can understand it. Lakewood does not have a good track record of attracting businesses. Just the iterations that have happened here in Lakewood Town Center. So you've got an area that's working. Why would you tear that down? I just ask you to think about this problem more creatively, because we do need affordable housing, but just be more creative about it, please.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to public comments under the tax exempt? Seeing none, I'm going to declare the, sir, are you planning to speak? I declare the public comment closed. So next we have ordinance number 830. For that, we have Deputy City Clerk Todd Cross, please move to adopt.
Deputy Mayor, we have ordinance number 830, amending the 2025 to 2026 biennial budget. As you mentioned, for this, we have Deputy City Manager Todd Kraus.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and council members. This evening before you is the carry forward budget adjustment for your consideration and approval. This information has been available on our website since about mid-April, and it was presented at the study session on April 21st, followed by a public hearing on May 5th. Since that public hearing, there has been no changes to the carry forward budget adjustment. And that concludes my presentation.
Are there any questions for Ms. Kraus? Can I get a motion to approve ordinance number 830?
Move adoption of ordinance 830.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Are there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ordinance is approved. Thank you. Unfinished business, Mr. Caulfield?
Deputy Mayor, there's no unfinished business or any new business this evening.
So item for discussion is review of the Clover Creek flood control status. Dr. So please call on Mr. Engineer Weston Ott. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Moss, members of the council. So just a real quick, short presentation on our status on the Clover Creek flood study as it's moving forward. With me tonight, I have Ryan Retzloff, who was the consultant project manager for our first phase of the project. He'll be available at the end of this brief presentation to answer any questions you may have. So I have Ryan with me this evening. Ryan's currently with Keller, and and this will be later on in the presentation, we'll be moving forward with Keller on the next scope elements of this project. Oh, to that area. So real quick, we'll go over the first 6 items that are the history of what we've already done to date, and then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So I wanted to start with a slide on how we got here. So back in 2020, we were looking at the FEMA flood maps, and we felt like they over-predicted the 100-year flood. So we did analysis of the potential for the 100-year flood and found it was actually larger than we anticipated. There's a number of colors there. The blues, starting in the dark blue, that's like 0 to 1 foot of flooding. And then it lightens all the way up to your red, which would be your 9 to 10 foot, your orange red, and then 10 foot plus. So you can see the extent of the flood. However, it's fairly shallow overall, but it does consume a large area, even overtopping I-5. So part of that original study that we conducted in 2021, 2022, and finished in 23, some of the focus of that was to come up with a preferred alternative. So we'll talk this evening a little bit about the alternatives, the preferred alternative, and what has been done to date. So this is the FEMA flood map. The blue is the 100-year FEMA flood map, and then the orange is the 500 or gold color. And that's closer to what we see when the 100-year flood was modeled. So this exhibit is one of the maps that came out of the work we did in 2021 through 2023, showing the modeled 100-year event And you can see a section of it crosses I-5. This is just to show its extent, not its depth, how it covers Lakewood. So knowing this, looking at what we would do to mitigate the 100-year flood, because again, it's public safety, want to eliminate damage to both the public and the private infrastructure, reducing our risk to our citizens, and also at the time, looking at what development can occur in the Springbrook area by taking away that 100-year flood that makes development much more likely. And again, if we were to have I-5 and Pack Highway flood, that would put us in a situation where we would have to exit off I-5 at Gravelly Lake, go around the city, maybe come up 100th and back to I-5, or come off 512 and come back in a similar way. So it'd be very impactful if I-5 were to remain flooded for a period of time. And then lastly, flood insurance is very expensive. This would add properties in the Springbrook area and other parts of Lakewood near Clover Creek that would have to get flood insurance if we were to revise the 100-year flood through a letter of map revision to the FEMA map. Through that study, we came up with 4 alternatives. And the first one titled levy, that's really a setback levy. We could look at channel within the creek channel and floodplain enhancements. A levee could be built just at I-5 to mitigate water going over I-5 and to the north. And then lastly, we always look at the do nothing alternative. There's some colors there to those bars. So multiple things were looked at. Water quality, enhancement to the community benefit, ease of implementation. So that's all outlined in the work that was done previously. But there was a considerable amount of effort and thought put into these different bands to develop this scale for which alternative we felt was best. So again, the do nothing alternative, the channel enhancement, that's work in the stream. The I-5 levee would protect I-5, but it would still flood that area to the south of I-5, the Springbrook area. And then the levee, the setback levee, there would be some properties impacted, but you would be connecting from the JBLM to the Bridgeport Way side, protecting those properties to the east of that setback levee from JBLM to I-5. So we also looked at this from a cost standpoint. And again, kind of gauging through the public engagement using your red, yellow, green concept. So through the public process, the do nothing alternative wasn't positively received. But it would have no cost and it would be easily to implement. Properties would just have, that are within the revised flooding area would have to get flood insurance. The setback levy was well received. And in that same, all 3 of the next 3 options were in the same order of magnitude for cost, was well received by the community. A little more difficult to implement, and there would be some permitting concerns. The I-5 levy, while similar in cost, wasn't as beneficial to the community because properties south of I-5 and east of Bridgeport Way would still flood. And the channel enhancement would provide a benefit to the creek. It was somewhat received with the community, but it would still flood all those properties south of I-5 and east of the creek. So talking a little bit about where that setback levee is, and then this is at a graphical level. That's the next steps in the project would to be refined, what that levee would look like in its exact location. But that yellow line there is roughly where we would anticipate that setback levee. So the area between the setback levy, I-5, the railroad tracks at JBLM would be taken out of the, primarily taken out of the 100-year floodplain. So again, as I mentioned, we did do public engagement. We did have a number of public meetings. Those were available both in person and virtually. Again, this was towards the end of COVID. Attendance in person was maybe less than we would get now, but we did go through that process. We also had stakeholders, and that included people that were invited from WashDOT, JBLM, the tribes, and other organizations. So where we find ourselves today. So the project is still in its early stages. That first set of bullets, that's where we ultimately like to be, have our design completed, our permitting, and then be at that point to do construction. But there's also a substantial amount of funding needed to do that work. What we did in 2024 was solicit consultant assistance for this project. And what we were asking for at that time was a 30% scope. This would give us the opportunity to move forward and look for grant funding to build a project of this size. You can see those elements that we were looking for in that process. However, what we found is what we were looking for is more than what we've had budgeted to date. We currently have about $500,000 budgeted. And what that can get us is what's shown in those items there, which is still advances the project forward. Nothing would be wasted. It would put us in a good situation to move forward with more grant or more funding to move to a 30% plan set or 30% completion. So just in summary, the work was completed in 2023, presented to council. The direction was to move forward with the setback levy alternative. We have about $500,000 of funding that's made up of Pierce County Flood Control Zone flood funding and surface water funds. At this time, WashDOT and JBLM are not part of the funding. To get to a 30% scope, we were looking at almost $900,000. That's in 2024 dollars. So that puts us at a shortfall of $365,000 or almost $400,000. Sorry about that. I hit the wrong button. So with that, Ryan and I are available for any questions you may have of what we've done to date. And we plan to move forward with in the budget that we have appropriated through that 10% level.
Okay, question, Mr. Boki.
I'll call you.
Thank you, Mr. Ott. Appreciate the presentation. I want to talk a little bit about the setback levy, and I'm looking at the satellite photo on 366. And first of all, let's start with a couple of questions. First of all, what does it not do? Because it looks like it's relatively short, right? It's running from the railroad tracks to Bridgeport. And then two, there are properties, including some apartments. And then on at the end towards Bridgeport, I don't know if it's apartments or it's like a church thing or something in there. I don't know what that is. Having driven past it, I don't know what it is. So what should we do with them? Should we be considering this as part of the cost of doing the setback levy, moving them out, buying those properties out? Because that's what the county, I'll tell you from experience, that's what the county does, right? They spend quite a bit of money and they get federal dollars before they build the setback levy, they're actually purchasing the properties in front of where they hope to put the setback levies, including splitting properties and various things like that. So that's why I asked that question. So what should we do with that? And then what are the negatives to the setback levy?
Yeah, so Ryan and I will answer that question. Just first off, those properties are currently within the 100-year flood and they would be in the after condition. And that would be the recommendation, is looking at relocation, purchasing of that property. And that's part of the expense of this project. Ryan, would you like to add?
Yeah, just to add that the yellow line there is not completely inclusive of everything that would be needed. There would also need to be some smaller levees or walls moving along the creek to the north to make sure that there aren't any breakouts further down the creek.
So when we cross, okay, so, and just for everybody's reference, we're not asking for any levies on the other side of the creek because the land is higher. And we know that from the park and everything else. It's 20 feet or more above the stream. And so we believe we're okay there, or at least for the scientific purposes, we're okay. But when you get on the other side of Bridgeport, does it get flat on both sides? Will we need, how does it work over on that side?
You want to talk a little bit about?
And then the other side of I-5 when we get on the other,
It's a similar situation where the south side of the creek is elevated enough so that it doesn't flood to the south.
Okay.
But as we move downstream towards the city center, part of our study would include additional survey so that we could update our model and understand exactly where the water is leaving the channel, because there's just small little portions. It's not the whole bank. And so some smaller improvements would need to be done as we move downstream along the creek.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Pearson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So you had mentioned that right now at this time, JBLM and WashDOT aren't funding partners. Would they start getting involved in providing some funds at once we get to 30% design or what, I guess, what does the funding contributions look like from WashDOT and JBLM as we move forward?
Yeah, right now there's no commitment from either group, even though they attended some of the meetings, aren't aware of the project. Materials were submitted to them, but I don't believe they're under any obligation to be funding partners. It's just bringing that to the council's attention that currently we're funded through, and again, it's through 10%, but it's through the flood control zone district and surface water funds. So it would require reaching out not only to WashDOT and JBLM, but any other funding sources. And Ryan, I don't know if you want to mention some of the other options.
We explored different funding options back in 22, 23. Those are documented in our report. The landscape for funding of these types of projects has changed. So we would want to revisit that. And that's part of why the city solicited 30% plans. Those 30% plans are basically evidence of the project and allow you to put those out for additional funding.
Okay, thank you. And then as we go through, these different variations and kind of analysis here, my understanding is doing setback levies and any sort of levy work that involves, a letter of map revision or whatever, isn't going to create a rise downstream. So would these projects be, even though we're kind of cutting off flows and moving things around, we're not making things worse downstream or upstream, I guess?
You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about earlier, where we would want to do a survey down the north side or the the right side of the channel as we're looking downstream. Because we are seeing in the model that we have right now where there are some breakouts, where there is some flooding leaving the channel past a certain point, then the creek is deep enough on both banks that it no longer floods, even when it's confined by the levees.
Okay. And then, so I guess with a levy project like this, on the screen here, I can't remember what that street is called that goes over the highway there, the smaller one. But that area adjacent to JBLM over there, that would then become kind of open for development, so to speak, because it would be out of the floodplain now, right?
So you're talking about the property to the east of 47th,
Yeah.
north of the yellow line or the setback levy up to I-5. If that were protected by the setback levy, then it would remove that 100-year flooding
Yeah. Okay.
encumbrance. I don't believe there's any flooding that gets to that. No, yeah.
I don't have any more questions right now. Thank you.
Councilmember Marcelo.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Ott. Are we obligated by the state to protect I-5 by preventing flooding there?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And has anything changed for this since the last time you presented to us?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, where we left off last time was to move forward with 30% for that setback levy. And that's what we were working on in 24, soliciting those consultant services. So really, we find ourselves in a pretty similar place to where we were in late 23.
And would we be any worse financially if we were to put a stop on this until we had more funding from the state or from JBLM?
So the escalation would be your construction costs. So, construction costs ebb and flow on how, they don't always follow the time value of money. So it would just depend if construction costs, we had a large escalation, that would be a risk, but at least it would be a known risk. Construction costs can go, 2 to 10% a year, depending on the item. But that would be your risk is time value of implementing the construction.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Branstetter.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Ott, thank you. The Pierce County has been having a lot of discussions around the Chambers Clover Creek watershed, and particularly looking at farther to the east, which is really the headwaters of where that is, and of doing some, when your event would be some channel improvements or increasing that over there in order to create some capacity for water, essentially expanding the wetland area, being able to do that out in the rural areas where that is, as well as in doing something with the channel, like it's like in the Spanaway area or where when they channeled Clover Creek, they had something to do with creating this particular issue. And that to what extent would success on their part in doing that affect the model of where we think the 100-year floodplain is?
So Ryan, I'll let you talk a little bit about that. But one way I look at Clover Creek in our portion, it's kind of like we're the bottom of the funnel. So that water's still going to come to us in a 100-year event. But I don't know if some of the upstream work would attenuate that. So Ryan, do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, I don't know what those improvements are or exactly where they are, so it's hard for me to speculate on what those impacts might have on the 100-year floodplain. I do suspect that those impacts would be minimal, just because a 100-year floodplain, there's or a 100-year flood is substantial enough that improvements that we can make typically don't make really big changes.
And so we are planning off of the model that we financed and obtained when we thought that the FEMA floodplain map was incorrect. And as you said, that we determined that in fact it was incorrect, but it was incorrect in the wrong direction than what we thought. But has FEMA agreed with our model?
So we haven't approached FEMA with that yet, those results yet.
So when is FEMA programmed to update their floodplain map routinely? Is that a 10-year project, or how often do they do that?
It was recently updated. I don't remember the exact date. It would be, I believe the county is the floodplain manager for this, and so it would be their responsibility to update the flood mapping based on this information.
So it would seem that certain sources of funding, particularly federal sources, that if we are in disagreement with FEMA about where the floodplain is, would be an obstacle to overcome and to obtaining some federal funding is this watershed something that's under the jurisdiction of the Corps of Engineers, or is it a different federal agency that would be the go-to funder?
You'd have to get the levy approved through the Corps, right?
There's a couple different permits that would be necessary to obtain through the Corps for a levy and work within an existing waterway.
Okay. And I share Mr. Pearson's concern about doing something on the in this area, having unintended results in the further downstream, where quite frankly, there is not that much disparity between the left bank and the right bank in certain areas of that down there. And you mentioned you're going to look at that. Is that part of the plan that you're looking for?
Yeah, we've modeled the entirety of Clover Creek, starting from JBLM down to Silicon Lake. And so that's what I was referencing prior, where once you get down to a certain extent, it stays within the confines of the banks, because the creek bed is low enough that it has capacity to not flood.
You can't really see.
And I guess that one of my guesses, you have this photo right here. If you can go back to that page that listed the options. There's Mr. Ott, there's a chart that you had that you listed the 4 options, and then you go back one more. Maybe one more. There's one with a photo on it. Yes, this one. Yep. The one. What am I looking at? Is that what you envision the levee looking like?
That is an example of a flood wall. So a levee could be an earthen mound, probably similar to what you're envisioning in your head, but where you don't need 10 feet of height, you can use something smaller, something less impactful like this to achieve the same goal.
So would the levee project that you're envisioning be a combination of an earthen berm and this?
some of the engineering that we will do and exploration with a geotech will help us determine that. At this point, we haven't really explored enough to determine what that might look like.
Then in the suggestion that there may be, depending on where we place the levee berm, there would be then some structures, current structures that would be trapped between the creek and the levee, okay? And that best practices are that generally you buy those out to create so that area essentially becomes floodplain, wetlands, open space to be able to go and do that. So do your estimates on the chart that had estimates include the cost of perhaps having to buy out those properties and acquire them?
On the wrong. The one with the.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, the three, the red, yellow, green.
No, they do not.
That's just the cost of the levy in $2022, correct?
Okay,
Correct.
so given but the $500,000 that you spoke of is in fact money that we have in the current biennial budget to further evaluate and move this forward. And we're still in the case of where after that phase, we're then going to need to do some serious working with partners to raise the money to be able to do that. Is that an inaccurate statement going forward? And but we haven't really, so we certainly haven't really had those conversations with any success yet.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. So, so until we finish this first phase of work that gets us to a 10% design, is that what I'm reading? We've got funding to get to 10%.
That's correct.
Then we're going to hit a period with a pause until we can work out the funding piece.
That's one advantage is that at 10%, we can reevaluate where we're going next. You know, look at a good, like what we'll need to get to 30% that cost. And then we can also start talking to different partners at that point. But knowing full well, we need to be at that 30% level if we're going to pursue grant funding.
Okay, and then I just did one other thing. When we became aware of this particular problem, we did some zoning changes in some of the areas of the floodplain, particularly to adjust some zoning so that where it's kind of going to be inappropriate for residential uses, and we rezoned it into more commercial uses on the east side of 47th and north of 123rd, being able to go and do that. If this levee project is completed and successful as envisioned, would that open that question up as to whether residential uses in those areas could now be supported with the minimum risk to a higher density of people?
I think that is a question that, you know, the council would need to revisit if they were desiring to change the zoning of a portion of Springbrook from its current commercial to another zoning use. And that would go through the typical process.
Okay, thank you for the status report, and I appreciate, I appreciate it. And being able to go forward and, I think, even incremental progress is progress. So thank you. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Mr. Pearson.
Thank you. So I've worked on a few of these projects and have a little understanding on kind of how some of them work, but so I get the 2022 dollars here, so that doesn't include any property acquisition. That's just, is that what you were chatting about earlier?
You want to speak to that one, Ryan?
Yeah, we could get in the ballpark of what we thought were the engineering and construction costs.
Okay.
The relocation costs were not something that we were comfortable projecting on what that might look like.
Okay.
It's a little outside the area of our expertise, and so that's why that wasn't included.
Okay, so I mean, this could be quite a bit, quite a bit more after that gets factored in. And then, so, as you're getting close to 10% design, I guess, is that where you guys would be kind of coming back to us with some preferred alternatives and, maybe identifying that if we did some setback levies here and, bought, these properties that they could get, habitat enhancement and be better, suited to get different types of funding or things like that? Is that kind of the next steps here?
That's what I envisioned, that we would definitely be back. And then also at that time, we'd be looking at what does our future public involvement process look like? What recommendations would we have when we went from that 10% to that 30% level? Because we definitely want to have our stakeholders and our public know what we're doing in this area. You
Great,
want to add
thanks.
anything?
And then one of the comments Mr. Brandsetter mentioned was that our, this new study was in conflict with the FEMA study and the FEMA maps. And my understanding of how the FEMA maps are basically generated is it's all kinds of different data sets that they generate the maps with. And at one point in time, they use like 5-foot contours to generate maps, and they slowly get better. But typically it's based on projects like this where the city is going out there and doing this work, and that's how the maps change. You submit a conditional LOMAR, whatever it is, and they basically evaluate the data and buy off on it. It's not so much that there's a conflict with the data, it's just that it's updated better data than we had last time that it was done. Is that generally, we don't have a conflict with?
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word conflict. You're right. And this model, what we have right now, took the previous model, the hydrology, so the amount of water running down the creek was evaluated, and then that was input into a 2D model, which is significantly more accurate than what you saw up there with all those lines, which is a 1D model based off of cross sections. And so we have more confidence in this model than the previous. The gold up there showing the 500-year floodplain doesn't even have cross sections, so I'm not really sure how they were able to determine what that was, other than just to say there's a water surface elevation and they projected that out over the surface.
Yep. Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Any other questions? So this will be coming back to the council.
I would estimate either end of this year or early next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we move on to comments by the city manager, Mr. Coughlin.
Well, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and good evening, council members. Just a few calendar updates if I could. So a couple of events happening on this Wednesday. The first one is beginning at 7:30 in the morning. LASA is having their annual friend-raising breakfast event over at the McGavick Center. Later on in the afternoon, Clover Park High School will be having their annual Arlington project at 4 p.m. out in front of the high school itself. The next day on Thursday, from 8 to 10, SSMCP will be having their elected officials council, which will be at Eagles Pride Golf Course. And then later on that morning from 10 to 1, Puget Sound Regional Council has their annual General Assembly meeting. A week from today, which is Memorial Day on May 26th, the Pierce County Veterans Advisory Council and Mountain View Funeral Home will be hosting a joint services Memorial Day ceremony over at the cemetery. On Wednesday, May 28th, from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Down at the Fort Steilacoom Park Pavilion, we'll have our volunteer recognition event. And then Thursday, May 29th, beginning at 8:30 in the morning, probably go most of the day. There's a tour of community centers that our Planning and Public Works Director, Jeffrey Mack, has scheduled. And the 4 facilities that have been identified as the Star Center in Tacoma, the Auburn Community and Events Center, Renton Family First, and Community Center up on the east side. And then on Thursday, later on that afternoon, Thursday, May 29th again, at 5:30 p.m., Lakes High School is having their 10th annual Student Celebration of Art over at St. Clair's Hospital, and I know many of you have attended that in the past. And then on Saturday, May 30th, from 4 to 7 p.m. is the Street Festival over at the Colonial Plaza. And then jumping into June real quick, on Tuesday, June 3rd, we will kick off our farmers market from 2 to 7 p.m. at Fort Steilacoom Park. So for this evening, that's my report, Deputy Mayor.
Are there any questions for Mr. Caulfield? Mr. Branciata?
Mr. Caulfield, you didn't mention the public reception honoring yourself. Were you planning to attend?
I do plan on attending. I don't know how many other people are planning on attending. But yes, that's on.
I have that in the 27th.
Yes, I'll let the council handle that. But yes, you are correct, Councilmember Branstetter. That's at May 27th from beginning at 5:30 p.m. So,
Thank you.
and once they start passing the mic, I'll be leaving. I'm just kidding.
Well, I hadn't heard, but the mayor isn't here, so I hadn't heard whether it was planning to be a roast or whether it was going to be more civilized.
Given the mayor and I are involved, it's probably not going to be very civilized.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to any other questions for the city manager? No. We'll move on to council comments, and we'll start with Mr. Boki.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Moss. Just a couple of them. Really, the Arlington project's a wonderful event, and I'm hoping to make that. I'm also hoping that I'll make the SSMCP thing on the 22nd, but I'm not sure. I never have made it in the past. Mea culpa here. And I'm really looking forward to all the huge events the week after that. Including the tour of the community centers. So a lot of really great things happening, and really appreciated the public comment tonight. Probably need to do a little bit more to talk about what's actually in the proposal. I mean, people were talking to the proposal and opposing something that isn't even in the proposal. So I kind of feel bad that they were doing that. And it certainly made hearing their voice, but it is a difference. You know, it's not in there currently. So so I look forward to more discussions surrounding the issues that were brought up tonight, and although I will say the lack of public comment on the comp plan amendments, which are actually very long lasting and have a lot of impact on the city, and no public comment. So I am concerned about that, because the things in the comp plan actually, I think, will, in my mind, have much greater impact than what's in the MFTE one. And so, you know, and it's under the same, I'm a little distressed that there's not more interest in a lot of those are state mandated items that we can't fight, and that are going to really have an impact on neighborhoods and whatnot. And there's literally nothing we can do about it. So with that, I will say wish everyone a great Memorial Day weekend and enjoy those days off. And hopefully the weather will be good. I think the weather's going to be good enough, so.
Going to request that.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Branstetter?
Hey, Mr. Mayor. Well, I did appreciate that there was a volumes of comment on the issue around the MFT in the tax area. I think that the theme of the comments that tended to be that people have a lot of different visions about what might happen. And one of the things that was lost, because one of the things that people seem to universally agree on was that this is an attempt by the city to actually build apartments there. And that we seem to be doing it with some disdain for what the community and public wanted. When in reality, if we go back 9 months, when this first surfaced inside of an ordinance that was before us, that we, as a council, very specifically chose to not act on it because there hadn't been sufficient public input and comment, and at that point that we sent it and asked the planning commission to begin that process of doing public work to be able to go and do that. And that it is not something that is there that has a predetermined outcome from our perspective, to the extent that we even have any unanimity on viewpoints on it. The other thing is that a lot of comments spoke about affordable housing and should affordable housing go there, and being able to go and do that. And whereas affordable housing is not really an element of the issue. And I don't know how we in 2 weeks do some correcting on that, but we've approved over the course of time. We've approved 10, 11, I think, counting the one we did 2 weeks ago, multifamily tax exemptions, and that out of all of those, only one actually resulted in any affordable housing units being built, because the development community took the tax exemption, but they don't want it to be so long that they have to commit units to being affordable. And part of that has to do with most of the units, the developer doesn't plan to actually own them for a long period of time. He plans to sell them to someone who's then going to own them as a residential business, property business, to be able to do that. And the one project that took a 12-year tax exemption and agreed to have 20% of the units be affordable, that resulted in 2 affordable units because it was the small building over on Bristol that was the first mixed use building in the town center to be able to go and do that. So the perspective is off, but I think that there are, but there are also a lot of other concerns that were raised here this evening about what is important to people. And particularly a good number of people recognize the need of where we have to invest in housing, but they think that there are more appropriate areas in the city to invest in it to do that. But there's interesting. The one solution that everybody was asking for, no one suggested. And that was to change the zoning. I mean, that's really what all the people were saying would actually meet their expectations. So, but that's not a this year thing. Then maybe next year, a citizen initiative to do a zoning modification for that particular portion of the downtown plan might be proposed by someone in the public. I'm planning to get to many of the events that the city manager listed. I'm going to go to the SSMCP, but I'm also planning on that morning to go to the Emergency Food Network event where they're doing their DoorDash celebration over there to be able to go and do that. I plan to go to the memorial activities at Mountain View on the 26th. I'm going to show up on the 27th to just verify that the city manager did show up. And I plan to go to the volunteer recognition and participate in the tour of regional community centers that do that. Earlier today, I went to Representative Levitt from the 28th District where she held a community meeting to be able to go and do that. And the major topic for tonight got raised by some folks there to her. And she was sort of non-committal of that's not something we're doing down in Olympia right now. But there were also a good number of comments, mostly positive about public safety, both comments with respect to both the city and the state doing some things that are promoting public safety in terms of being able to do that, which highlighted that was an area of importance to folks that are there. So that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pearson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I had couple of the comments that were brought up tonight from the MFTE. One of them was about, didn't feel like that we as a council and as a city did a good job of pushing back against some of the requirements that come down from the state and PSRC and Pierce County Regional Council and things like that. And I feel like we do as a whole. We try to be as realistic as we can with, you look at the historic growth trends of Lakewood and there's a massive, disconnect from our historic growth trends and what people are trending for us, right? Moving forward. They're not even close, right? So we do push back. We do try to, be as realistic as possible, but what's out there is we have the urban growth area and, they want it all to be as urbanized as possible. And they don't want to expand it out into the areas of Pierce County that are really more kind of receptive to some of these larger, subdivision projects right now and don't have some of the challenge. They have the environmental challenges, but they don't have some of the, property acquisition and redevelopment, all the challenges that come with trying to redevelop a city. So, it's a very complex equation and, we are involved in that. And I think that we do a good job of, bringing folks' voices to the table at those times. So I did want to comment on that. I did have one regret. I wish at the beginning of the MFT discussion, we would have kind of touched on the process a little bit more, because there was a number of commenters talking about, kind of assuming, I guess, that people are getting a tax break and it's costing, folks a bunch of money. And there's some, if that could be the case in some project, but that's also not the case on, there was a recent project that we had where there was like one or two, very shoddy little homes that were, paying kind of a nominal, property tax rate. And you can offset that through the construction taxes. There's an equation, that all the taxes kind of, that contribute to the general fund. It may not be that it's a huge detriment to the city as a whole. And if you look at a site that really isn't producing any taxes, what's the net loss? Well, there may not really be much of a net loss, and you'll get a gain in 10 years or something. So some of the construction taxes can offset that. So there's just a little bit more to it, I guess, is all I would kind of say. And I wish that we would have gone over a little bit more of the process. So I had that regret. The tip, I think that, as we move forward, this is really probably one of the last years, the last couple of years anyway, where many of the projects that have been kind of, not easy projects, but easier to fund type projects, connecting the downtown and these business centers and these industrial parks and, projects connecting back to the VA and things like that back there, where we've been able to get a lot of good federal funds. We're going to have to start putting together, kind of our list of projects that are going to be really funded by taxpayers, in the city. So, what does that look like? And getting some good feedback from the public on, how they would kind of rate those projects and what those projects really should be. Should they be a big road project, or should they just, should we just be trying to put in some pedestrian, connections here and there? So I think that we'll have lots of good discussions on those topics moving forward. So I'm excited about that. And then I got invited to go to the Home Builders Bus Tour in June 6th. So I'm going to attend that. Both I was invited at the county and the city, so I'm signed up. I'm going. So yeah, that'll be interesting. Going to visit some different subdivisions and things with some other elected folks and city and county staff folks. So I think that'll be hopefully fruitful and see what's been working out there and what hasn't been working, and how we can maybe help improve our codes here at the city to be more receptive to some of that infill. So, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Larcella.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a few things on my list today. First, I want to thank the folks in the audience while we worked through our microphone issues today. I think it sounded like things were better by the end of the meeting, so I don't know what changed, but it seemed to work better. One of the things brought up in public comment that I just did a little bit of research on, but I'd be curious whether we've done a sort of cost benefit analysis on, is if we've considered the cost of motion sensing streetlights. I did see a bunch of other, not a bunch, but a few other municipalities in the US have done it. And the idea is they're dim until a car shows up, and then they turn up, which may offset the cost of electricity to put those in. I'm not sure, but it'd be worth at least doing a cursory look at that. along the same lines of what Councilmember Pearson said, it would have been useful to educate folks ahead of time on the MFTE. And maybe having our communications staff have an MFTE overview or a primer for the public to really understand what it means, what it doesn't, how that impacts the community, so that we can, have people speaking from a fact-based center as opposed to what they've heard from their neighbors, which isn't always necessarily true. I do want to thank all the folks who came up for public comment on the MFTE topic. And it did make me think, if we don't want to expand the RTA to match the central business district, maybe we should consider reducing the central business district to match the RTA. If we want those things to match, as you said, maybe that'll be a citizen-driven initiative, but we could always look at that ourselves too. And then the last thing on that topic is I want to make sure that we and our residents don't vilify those who are struggling to find housing as we go through this. Have some compassion for those who are struggling. So with that, this week or last week, I participated in the community collaboration event here at City Hall. It was my third time, I think, attending that, and it was great to hear how local service organizations in our community are helping folks. So if other folks haven't had a chance to participate in that, it's great. I want to give a shout out to the city staff for the fishing event over the weekend. Lots of kids got their chance to fish, and every kid got to keep their fishing rod and the fish that they caught. So it was a good experience for people. Looks like it's going to be a busy week, especially on Wednesday, because I've got the LASA breakfast, a South Sound 911 Board of Directors meeting, the Arlington Project, and then I'm planning to attend the Community Services Advisory Board meeting on that evening. So lots of stuff on Wednesday, and then all the stuff that the city manager mentioned over the next 2 weeks before we get together again. So looking forward to all of that. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Mr. City Manager, do we need to give you some kind of feedback on the Beloved Community update? As to where we want to go with that? Is that what they were asking for, support from the council?
I'm sorry again, Deputy Mayor.
For the Dr. John Scott, when he
Yeah.
did the update, was they asking for some support from the city council?
I'm not aware. I think, this evening was just to provide you an update with the work that they've done, and that, that continues. And I know they hope that you as a council, both individually and as a group, will continue to attend the events that they put on.
Okay, I know 3 of us have been attending those, so we plan to continue that. I didn't know if you needed any direction or.
No, as far as I know, what I was told was they wanted to come and give you an update this evening. That was the purpose of their presentation.
Okay, thank you. The comments made tonight on the library with the homeless. Before we had signs that said no trespassing. Do we still have those signs, and can we provide those to the library if they accept them?
So first of all, Deputy Mayor, we do not own or operate the library. That is a separate legislative body that oversees that, and they're a separate municipal organization. We have offered in the past our no trespassing agreement, but that's a decision, that's a concerted decision that they have to make. We cannot force them to do it. It is private. I mean, it's public property, but it's also private property. The city doesn't have the ability to come in and demand that they, participate in our no trespass program, for example, like a lot of businesses in town and other property owners do. So again, that's on the library district. And I know in the past you've had joint meetings with their legislative body to communicate your concerns, and if that's something that you'd like to do, later this summer and have that, go again, or, yourself and the mayor meet with their, board chair and vice chair, that would be something else that you might want to consider.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I do plan to attend the SSMCP. I did attend the ribbon cutting for Classic Chassis. That was, it was great. It was kind of fun with the mascot that they had there. One suggestion that I have on the public comment sign-in sheets, I know we separate them up front, but if we can highlight the topic, I think that will cut back on some of the confusion. Okay. That's all I have. So is there anything for the good of the order? Then we are adjourned.
Had to earn your keep tonight, Mary.